Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Charlotte City Council. This is our meeting where we talk about the ideas and challenges in an open setting to further our education and discussion of major issues. So we call it our strategy session, where we talk about what we're doing and what we're trying to do. So I want to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone that's watching. Tonight's meeting is being held as a virtual meeting and is in accordance with the electronic meeting statutes. All of the notices and appropriate actions are being met through electronic means. I'd like to say that the public and media are able to view this meeting on the government channel and the city's YouTube page. As I understand it, Facebook is down. Is it still down, Ms.? So Facebook is down, and so those are the two options that you have for watching this meeting, and I hope that you will watch this meeting and learn more about how we conduct ourselves and our business. I'd like to begin with the introductions of people that are in the building, and then we will go to those that are joining virtually, and we'll start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4.
Happy Monday, Julie Eisel, serving at large and as Mayor Pro Tem.
Good evening, I'm Vi Lyles, and I serve as mayor.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Greg Phipps at large.
Good evening, I'm Victoria Watlington, City Council District 3.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Kay Cunningham, Mayor's Office.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
All right. Now we'll go to those that are joining us virtually. We'll go ahead and start with District 1.
Happy Monday, Larkin Eggleston, District 1.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Newton, District 5.
Good evening, Ed Driggs, District 7.
All right, thank you. Mr. Graham, we'll need you to turn on your camera at some point when we begin, if there are any actions to be taken, so just a reminder of that. We're going to have a strategy session, and we're going to address two specific topics this evening. The first one being our Vision Zero update. This is something that we have worked on. I'm sorry, we have other people joining us, other council members joining us. We have an at-large member joining us, and so if you'd like to make an introduction.
Yes. Good evening, Dimple Ajmera at large.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ajmera. So we're going to start that, and I'm just going to really turn the introduction over to the city manager so that he can get the staff in here, and we'll start with this. Mr. Winston is now joining us as well for the meeting tonight.
So, thank you, Mayor and members of council. As the mayor mentioned earlier, typically at these strategy sessions, it's an opportunity to talk about many of the issues that have been discussed in the various council committees. So we do have that opportunity at the end of the strategy session tonight. But what we also have are a couple of updates that have been requested by council. One is the Vision Zero update, as well as the River District update. And then we also have 3 nominations to boards, advisory boards, that would be sorted out after those presentations. And Mayor and Council, we do have 2 closed session items. So Mayor, if there aren't any questions, I can make the introductions for the first presentation.
Please do.
Okay. So Vision Zero, and I believe earlier I saw on the monitor our Deputy CDOT Director, Debbie Smith, and Major Dave Johnson, who will walk us through an update on Vision Zero through a traffic safety technology lens. I believe that at the last Safe Communities Committee meeting, the discussion began, and then it provided us with an opportunity to share data with your entire council. So, Mayor, if there are any questions, I'd like to turn it over to Debbie and Major Johnson.
Okay. Major Johnson.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I would just like to start with a gracious thank you to CMPD for hosting us in their space. And I just would love to have the witnesses around the room to say I'm definitely not in the chief's chair. So with that, let's get started. Next slide, please, Wendy. The purpose of today's presentation is an opportunity to review Charlotte's commitment to Vision Zero. We're going to walk through some highlights on specific traffic safety technology tools. We'll spend some time summarizing Charlotte's automated enforcement. And once again, this is something that the Chief and Major Dave Johnson went over in the Safe Communities Committee. So at the end, we will recap some of those questions that came up during that committee meeting. So with that, next slide. So Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic safety related deaths and severe injuries while increasing safety, health, and mobility for all. Charlotte renewed its commitment to Vision Zero in 2018 with the creation of this Vision Zero action plan designed to eliminate those traffic deaths and severe injuries by 2030. So this slide really shows that traditional approach in comparison to a Vision Zero approach, with really the focus being on people are going to naturally behave in a certain way, and we don't want those mistakes or accidents, if you will, to be fatal. Human error is part of something we should be planning for. So the focus, though, for tonight's presentation is really going to be traffic safety through that technology lens, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to highlight that there is some really great work that is being done with Vision Zero funding, thanks to council and voter support. In 2018, thank you, we've been working on spending that $2 million, as well as 2022 million, and your recommendation was to double that amount for 2022 bond to $4 million. So with that funding, we install traffic calming devices in neighborhoods, thoroughfare street lighting, and pedestrian and safety projects. And some of those items you'll see in the presentation. Next slide. So real quickly, before I jump into these technology tools, I want to recognize the amazing collaboration with the Vision Zero Task Force. We have a group of over 50 people representing 30 distinct agencies that are committed to these Vision Zero goals. And when the task force was first formed in 2018, just after our action plan was developed, we had somewhere around 20 agencies. And I just think that speaks to the commitment in the community to continuing this Vision Zero advancement. CMPD is an outstanding partner right there with us. Some of the other groups include Atrium and Novant, CATS. We have CMS, and we have multiple representatives from CMS. We have the DA's office and Mecklenburg County Public Health, the Sheriff's Office, NCDOT, and dozens more. So just wanted to highlight that. Next slide. So here are some of the tools that we're going to talk about in today's presentation. We're going to talk about leading pedestrian intervals, something that we include with that leading pedestrian interval known as an enhancement. We've got pedestrian rectangular rapid flash beacons, LED smart street lights. I'll then turn over the presentation to Major Johnson to talk about enforcement programs on the high injury network. And lastly, we'll wrap up with driver feedback signs on these technology tools. Next slide. Many of the pedestrian crashes that happen at signalized intersections are due to drivers not yielding the right of way to a pedestrian. A leading pedestrian interval gives the pedestrian a 3-second head start to enter that intersection and really get themselves positioned so that a driver can see them. So those 3 extra seconds really are a fantastic safety feature. We have deployed this at over 248 locations. And as you can see in the picture that I show here, you can see that there's the pedestrian indication with the walking man turned on. The 2 pedestrians are entering the intersection while we're still seeing a red signal indication. Next slide. So building on the leading pedestrian interval, the enhancements would include things that I have circled here, which are the additional signage. It's a blank out sign that warns the driver about to make that turn next to the flashing yellow arrow to reinforce that there is a pedestrian in the crosswalk. So once again, we have deployed this at 21 intersections, and of that, 33 approaches in those 21 intersections have this treatment. So once again, a very positive safety enhancement. Next slide. The pedestrian rectangular rapid flashing beacon is installed where we have marked crosswalks that meet criteria, and that criteria is typically a 2 or a 3-lane roadway. And this type of installation is a step above just yellow flashing lights because those strobe effect of those rectangular rapid flashing lights really alert that driver to the presence of the pedestrian. And so we have that currently installed in about 5 locations. Next slide. The LED smart street lights, that's an opportunity for this city and Duke Energy to partner together in the North End Smart District. And we work together to install these devices, these smart streetlight devices, on several hundred individual lights. And this map that I show you on the screen are those images of those individual distinct streetlights. And green is a good symbol. It means all of them were working. One big advantage is that we can monitor the lights in real time. And what happens is that when you see that real-time notification, when there's a power outage or a power loss or even a variation in the voltage. And so what that does over time, successful pilot here, we're working with Duke to begin deployment of these smart streetlights citywide. It will replace a manual process that we have to do that nighttime inventory. So once again, increasing pedestrian and vehicular safety because those lights can self-report and that outage can be repaired sooner than that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Major Johnson. Next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. When we at CMPD look at the factors that contribute to our fatality accidents and our serious injury crashes, we know that speeding leads the way as far as contributing factors to those wrecks, followed closely by distracted driving and driving while impaired. In 2020, for comparison purposes, our major crash unit investigated 81 fatalities. And unfortunately, we're on track to probably meet or exceed that number this year. When we formulated this slide last week, we didn't have some new numbers. So since that last week, we've had 4 additional crashes for a total of 60. And we've had 5 additional fatalities since last week for a total of 64. Next slide, please. We focus our transportation units enforcement efforts in these 30 high injury network enforcement corridors. And you can see them listed on the map. I believe when we made our committee presentation, someone asked for this specific information, so we want to make sure and provide it here. Like I said, this is where our transportation unit, our motors, our DWI task force, and our major crash folks focus their enforcement efforts in the jurisdiction. They do that through a variety of enforcement operations, including seatbelt checks, a saturation patrol where they could flood the area with traffic enforcement officers looking for all manner of traffic violations. They do specific DWI checkpoints, and they do radar enforcement within these enforcement corridors. Now, these aren't the only places in the city, obviously, where our transportation folks work. We also are directed through our citizen complaints. We can receive those in through various channels, but we address speeding complaints, we address stop sign violations, and certainly at the beginning of the school year and throughout the year, we address any complaints that we receive about school buses being illegally passed in the roadway. Next slide, please. One piece of technology that we have available to us at CMPD, we have 2 of these driver feedback signs. They are solar powered, battery powered. We can deploy those fairly quickly and mount them on just about any type of street sign pole that may be near the roadway. We can deploy these in response to a high increase in crashes, citizen complaints, any nature of manner in which we want to, 1, alert drivers to their speed, and 2, collect speed data in those areas to help us formulate a response. The cost of those are about $4,500 a piece. Like I said, we currently have access to 2 of those that stay deployed on a pretty regular basis by our transportation folks. Next slide, and I'll turn this back over to Deb.
Thank you. And so along the lines of the driver feedback signs, CDOT has developed a program to address some frequent locations where we get community concerns, high injury network locations, or those places that we know have excessive speeding concerns. And so with that, CDOT has developed a program where we deploy about 15 signs shown in locations on the map that you see. And what we do is we are maximizing the effectiveness of the newness of the signs. And so what that means is that we are taking those signs And not all 15 are always deployed all at one time. We actually rotate them around, therefore really getting that bang for your buck. Most of our safety studies demonstrate that these devices have strong reduction in speeding when they are first placed. And so we rotate those around in those places to maximize that new effect and get that information. And so as Major Johnson also mentioned in his driver feedback signs, we collect data as well and can see real time the effectiveness of those devices. So with that, next slide. So automated enforcement is a term that we use, and we usually are using that term to describe speed cameras or red light cameras. And so just wanted to make that clarification. Next slide. Charlotte ran a speed camera program in Charlotte, and Major Johnson presented this at the Safe Communities Committee on August 10th. So I'm just going to really quickly highlight that for the rest of council to hear. So Charlotte operated the program from 2003 to 2006, and this had specific legislation that was enacted to allow Charlotte to operate these cameras. However, an officer had to be present within that van. Also, the 14 locations were specifically called out in that legislation as well. And those corridors really were selected based on a close proximity to a school and did not necessarily represent the location with the highest number of crashes or the highest number of speed-related crashes. And so that legislation, while it was enacted, it did have a sunset date, and that sunset date was in 2007, and so it was not renewed. So as of today, no North Carolina municipalities are operating camera programs today for speeding. Next slide. So now moving to the Safe Light camera, that's the program for red light cameras. Next slide. So red light cameras are deployed at signalized intersections. The technology works in conjunction with our traffic signal and has detection with the ability to know when a vehicle crosses the white stop bar after that traffic signal turns red. So sensors in the pavement trigger high-speed cameras that take 2 pictures per violation, and those citations are then mailed to the owner of the vehicle. So CDOT, we maintain traffic signal timing at all 893 traffic signals in the city, and we use national and state-adopted formulas to calculate the red and the yellow time, and so we call that clearance intervals. And so we base that on nationally adopted formulas, and it bases it on the speed limit and the geometry at the intersection. And so yellow lights typically are between 3 and 5 seconds long, and red lights are usually 1 to 2 seconds long. More red time and more yellow time do not improve the safety at an intersection. And so there are really specific reasons why those calculations are in place. Next slide, please. So Charlotte Safe Light program. So we operated the program starting in 1998 and expanded it to 20 intersections during the life of the program. And those red dots on your map show those 20 locations where at some point between 98 and 2006, we operated a camera program. Next slide. I'm sharing some analysis and evaluation at 4 locations, so 4 out of the 20. And it's important that I point out that 4 of the 20 were consistent throughout the duration of the camera installation. And so we had really great quality data in the 3 years before the program started, so 1995 through 1998. 3 years during the program, 98 to 2001, and where it was really important that we have that data after the program ended and terminated so that we could understand what that overall impact is. And so as you can see, the first box above shows the total number of crashes at all approaches to an intersection. And I'll pause there and just mention that at a signalized intersection, we may have only had a camera for a red light running at one of those 4 approaches. And so this top box captures the total number of crashes. What we saw is a reduction in angle crashes, both during the operation of the program and 3 years after the program was discontinued. Rear end crashes, while we saw a slight increase during the operation, we saw a decrease in the 3 years after operation of the program. The box below is specific to the approach where we had the camera. And so once again, it's the number of crashes for that camera approach only. And what we found was that angle type crashes in the 3 years before, we saw a reduction while we were operating the program and a very slight increase after the program ended. And then overall, we saw rear ends stay steady in the 3 years before and during, but we saw a decrease in the 3 years after. Next slide. And so Charlotte suspended the program for red light cameras at the end of 2006, and we were watching very closely the City of High Point, the lawsuit that was filed against the City of High Point. And when the North Carolina Supreme Court decided to not see the petition for review in July of 2007, which then meant it stood as is, what we found is that the city then suggested that we go ahead and terminate the program. And so what the Court of Appeals decided is that while camera enforcement programs were not illegal, the clear proceeds, which was defined as 90% of that civil penalty, was to be paid to the local school board. And so the City of Charlotte negotiated with CMS, and in 2009, City Council authorized a payment of about $4.7 million to CMS based on the proceeds the proceeds from running that program. So once we paid in 2009, we formally terminated that program in 2010. Next slide, please. Program costs. So a question came up at the Safe Communities Committee meeting, just asking about how much does it cost to operate a program and what revenues were received. So I thought, that it would be great to be able to show the last full year that we operated both the Safe Speed and the Safe Light cameras. So the Safe Speed in 2006, the total revenues, which means that's what was received from the civil penalties, $1.48 million. And in 2006, our expenses, which means the administration to run that program, was $1.195 million. Safe Light, 2006 revenues were $1.3 million, and the 2006 expenses were $910,000. And so where that's important is that I really want to point out that it costs a lot, much more than the 10% of the administration that is allowed under the legislation to really run this program. Next slide, please. The red light camera programs in North Carolina. Next slide. Special legislation currently exists for Raleigh. So what you see on this screen is Raleigh, Fayetteville, Greenville, Wilmington are the organizations that are currently running red light programs. Raleigh does have special legislation which defines the clear proceeds as those funds remaining after covering the costs of the program, whereas Fayetteville, Greenville, Wilmington continue to operate the system similar to the way the City of Charlotte was operating it, which were civil penalties with the 90% and 10% rule do apply. And there are interlocal agreements between those counties and the school boards to share in that actual cost to run that program above the 10%. Next slide, please. So let me just recap There were a few questions that came up at the Safe Communities meeting, and this slide really just gives you an opportunity to go back and see where we have answered those questions. So one was providing the list of the high injury enforcement corridors. We cover that on slide 11. CDOT can control the traffic signal operations, and I walked you through that on slide 17. We talked about the impact on crashes on slide 19 for the red light camera program, and slide 21 covered the revenues and the expenses. And so with that, I want to wrap up with what can Charlotte do? Next slide. We want to continue to build on these strong partnerships that we have through the Vision Zero Task Force and with the actions in our Vision Zero Action Plan. And we really want to focus on the technology solutions that truly do address Charlotte's top transportation safety priorities. So some of those that we talked about today were the leading pedestrian intervals, that really focuses on pedestrian crashes. That's an important top priority for us. We want to continue the installation of driver feedback signs in these priority locations. Once again, Major Johnson mentioned speeding being the #1 contributing factor to fatalities and serious injuries. And so what we are finding is that we want to explore those technology solutions that really do address the speed related and our top priorities. And what we're finding is that red light running is not one of the top priorities and the top factors that we're seeing in crashes, fatalities, and serious injuries. And so with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. I've got Major Johnson here. We've also got Lieutenant Wally, if there are any other questions that come up that we can answer.
So before we begin our discussion, I want to say thank you for this update, and thanks to the committee for bringing this to our attention for the full council. I do want to say that as a result of this discussion, I have written a referral to the Safe Communities Committee to actually ask them to look at technology and what that we can do that would enhance our operation for our safety programs using technology, and for them to explore the best practices and the best technologies out there to bring forward. And I've asked if they can do that within 60 days, so by the end of December, to be able to come in and have some recommendations. So I think it's really helpful to provide your thoughts about what that committee should be looking at, and would include, in addition to the discussions that we've had around our existing program, but how do we make our existing program react more quickly with the technology and the innovations that have occurred since we've adopted this Vision Zero policy. So I have Ms. Ajmira, followed by Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Winston, followed by Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great presentation. Thank you so much for addressing all the questions and requests that were raised at the committee meeting. This was very helpful. I appreciate the recommendation. Can we go back to slide number 25 here? Okay, so a couple of questions. So when we are deploying street lights, are these street lights that's in our backlog, or are these existing street lights?
Yes, absolutely, Ms. Ajmir. Let me answer that question. So as we are deploying new street lights, we are working very closely with Duke Energy to get those smart devices so that we can do a deployment together. What we are finding is that as they get the devices in, we are working with them, whether it would be new installation or anytime after March of next year. They will likely be doing maintenance on existing streetlights, and anytime they go out to perform service to a light, they would seek to add these smart devices. So we're just working on our timing for those installations.
Okay, so this is a device that will be going with the street light that's already existing.
You are correct. You are correct.
So this doesn't address the huge backlog that we have for our streetlights request.
We still have priority locations prioritized, correct? We still have a backlog of streetlights that we are installing.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
I feel like I'm a broken record here, but we have many of our major thoroughfares that are missing streetlights, and that's really the funding issue. I've talked to staff about W.T. Harris, for an example, all the way from Old Concord to Plaza. There are no streetlights. I mean, I see a lot of fatalities on that road. I'm sure there are so many other, but we got to address the huge backlog that we have when it comes to streetlights, where we have no streetlights whatsoever. Certainly, I appreciate here we are using technology to address Vision Zero and really address some fatalities here. I also see there is a purple light, and I know that it has something to do with technology glitch. And I think it could be a hazard because it's so bright, and I'm sure they exist throughout the city. What are we doing to address that?
Duke is aware, great question, Councilwoman. Duke is aware that there was a manufacturing issue with those lights. And so while they know where some of those runs are, we encourage people to report to Duke where we see those. And so we are helping anytime we see those locations, we are also reporting to Duke where those locations are so that they can get repaired.
Thank you. So while we are installing that smart device, we definitely need one right by the government center where employees are crossing from parking to the government center. I've seen drivers just speed through that and they don't even see there is a walkway. And I'm sure many of our employees can attest to that. But certainly I think that would be a great place to start as well. For slide number 9, actually you already addressed that. Slide number 11, if we can go to that, where there is a citizen request, how do you enforce, and this question would be for CMPD, how do you enforce when you get a call about the speeding and, in real time, it's very difficult to enforce that kind of request as they come in. So how do you enforce that? I'm interested in understanding the process.
To enforce a speeding complaint, ma'am?
Yeah.
So there's one of a few ways that we can handle that. So we can refer that to the patrol division that is where that complaint is located, and they can send that to their shift officers, and some divisions have community coordinators or specified traffic officers who they can send out to that location and run radar and then take enforcement action as necessary. What we can also do is direct that complaint to our traffic enforcement team, our transportation division, like I mentioned before, our motorcycle officers, our DWI task force officers, and our major crash. And if they fall within, certainly within or adjacent to one of our high injury network locations, they can do a specific operation targeting that location. And we've done 84 of those type of operations so far this year. So about 2 per week, a little ahead of 2 per week of those types of specific operations. I can tell you so far this year, we've made in those 84 operations, 3,131 traffic stops that account for 4,296 separate violations. Now, those are not just speeding violations, but any violation that they happen to encounter while they're enforcing and addressing the speeding complaint gets addressed while they're there. So with the blue lights, the increased presence of officers in that area, what we hope is that the drivers will slow down and we have safer streets.
Thank you. But are you able to correspond to the data or the calls that we are getting to number of enforcements that are actually occurring? Because there are times by the time officer gets a call, the driver is already gone.
That's true. It's very true. So if it's a specific complaint about speeding, 911 will send that out over the radio then. So if we happen to have an officer in the area that can witness that and address it, they certainly will. But you're right. It's tough when they're mobile and transient in that nature. By the time we get there, it's hard to locate them. But I will say, if we do have officers in the area, they will address it. And we have engaged our real-time crime center in some of those operations too. So if a call comes in about someone driving extremely reckless, or if there was a hit and run accident where they fled the scene, we have those assets available to us to try to locate that vehicle and track its location and address it as we need to.
And those DWI checkpoints, are those in high injury network or are they close to certain businesses?
They are, no, they are within those high injury networks. That's the focus of those checkpoints. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for focusing on this. I mean, this is a really important issue in terms of safety. I mean, we have seen so many lives that have been lost because of the speeding, so many injuries. I mean, we got to get a handle on speeding on our streets. Thank you.
All right.
Great. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Hashmir. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Debbie and Major, thank you for the presentation. Sadly, there were 2 more fatalities today on Randolph Road. I don't know the reason, but because of an automobile accident. This is an issue that has been on the top of my mind since I've been elected. The issue of looking at the technology for red light cameras or speeding cameras. I hear what you're saying is that if the state doesn't allow us to do it, there's not much we can do. But what I hear how much it costs, but we don't factor into there, when we ran the program, how much did it save CMPD from not having to sit out and do all of this enforcement that you're talking about? I haven't heard the analysis from the police department as to whether or not you think it works. It's a technology that you'd like to have regardless of what the cost is. I find that in this city, when there's a will to do something, this city can figure it out how to do it. And in this case, I just keep hearing for years that it's a matter of cost. And this is specifically red light cameras because they are allowed. Other cities do have it. Now, if you have decided, if CMPD has decided it's not worth it, it really doesn't save them much, then that's the answer. But I haven't heard that. And I'll tell you, I think aside from the cost of housing in this city, speeding, reckless speeding, the drag racing at night is probably the #1 issue, at least that I hear about from constituents as an at-large member. And it's a real frustration that we can't really have a tool that is making it very clear to people we will penalize them if they run through a red light, or we will penalize them if it's excessive speeding. I'm not talking about, heck, I would probably be the first to get caught if it was some kind of speeding. I'm no angel on that, but I'm talking about people that really don't have much regard for other people on the road. And I guess I just want to hear from CMPD is if this is something that doesn't work, you don't like it, then so be it. But what do you think, Major?
So, ma'am, I'll say this, the red light cameras, I don't know how much time it saves CMPD. We don't do a lot of specific red light enforcement. So I don't think that we would see a significant savings as far as time spent by our officers doing those types of activities. Now, if it reduces accidents, which we've seen in the data presented today, that the 3-year after effect was that accidents were reduced, we can certainly calculate that and put a number and a value to that. We know that our officers, that's some of our divisions, that's the number one call for service, number-wise, is just minor traffic accidents that the officers have to respond to. So we could certainly put a numeric value to that. But, ma'am, we share your concern, certainly, with excessive speeding. You're all aware of the work that we've done this year to address drag racing and reckless driving. We're still working through some of those vehicle seizures, and we're very proud of the work that was done back in the spring, but we know that that work continues and needs to continue. And I'll say this, and it's been said before, it's been said by Chief Jennings, we are, one piece of the overall criminal justice system that is designed to hold these folks accountable for their actions. We've written, as I mentioned, 4,200 some odd traffic violations, and that's just from our transportation unit alone. So the enforcement side, I think, is being addressed. I think we could certainly do a better job at maybe holding other parts of the criminal justice system accountable for how those cases are managed, but they have their limitations as well. So, and we're certainly understanding of that. But I would say we are in favor of any technology that we could certainly prove and have the data to support. If we have technology that makes the streets of Charlotte safer for our motoring public and our pedestrians, CMPD would absolutely 100% be in support of pursuing that technology.
Thank you, Major. And I know you've been really responsive to some of the residents, in particular where the drag racing is going on. So I really do appreciate your efforts. My frustration is just from the standpoint of, I don't think anything's going to change. I guess that's what I'm hearing. But I think it's one of the biggest problems we have in our city because people know they're not going to be stopped. And I just don't know how we address that. So, but thank you very much for your work. I do appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
So Mayor Pro Tem, one of the cities had special legislation, which we should certainly do, but there is also an opportunity to collaborate with the school board as the other 3 cities have. And so that is something that we can have a conversation about because it is something that is safety for the entire community, and as many of us that participate in it can make it happen. As you say, if there's will to make us safer, then we can do this. So I had Mr. Winston following.
Yes, Mayor Lyles, I would just ask if we are going to take up resources researching the effects of technology enforcement, we need to also research and correlate technology improvements in vehicles that reduce accidents over periods of time, as we've seen, and the effects of accidents. I think that without doing so, I fear that false pretenses may be used by policymakers to make disjointed inferences and guidance and suggestions of future policies and purchases that we might want to, that might be suggested. I think that's certainly a data set that we need to overlay if we are going to seriously consider making significant investments in technology. I would ask, I see a lot of recommendations on enforcement on people, on drivers. I would ask you guys to look at that map that's up there right now and look at those 30 corridors of high injury network. I would ask you to also think back to the many discussions that we've had around the comprehensive 2040 plan over this past year, and think about how the city has developed, how we have built a hard infrastructure network of city that has intentionally segregated not just our city, but segregated people's ability to traverse our terrain by foot. You can see that once Charlotte was just really kind of densely situated in that that I-277 cluster. But through suburban sprawl, we built a city where people would come to work and drive out and away. It was meant to create a city that was dependent on automobiles, and specifically created to prevent pedestrian access to certain people in certain neighborhoods. So it is no surprise that there's a correlation of high injury networks that are not friendly to pedestrians and cause motor vehicle accidents. So I would ask, has CMPD, we've seen a lot of titles called Safe Streets and Speed Streets or whatever. Has CMPD made any recommendations for how we actually make the streets that we deem dangerous safer? And is there any kind of score of the streets?
So I would answer that by probably handing that to our friends at CDOT. There are a number of traffic calming technologies that can be put into place, but I'll toss that to Debbie here to see if she can address that question.
Absolutely. Councilmember Winston, duly noted on the way that we have over time built out Charlotte, and we are working on making great strides to change that. One number that I'll highlight for you is as we were assembling information on our pedestrian safety installations, so that would be these pedestrian beacons that I talked about earlier, these leading pedestrian intervals, pedestrian refuge islands. So what that is a median that allows a pedestrian to cross the street in 2 stages, therefore looking in only one direction at one time. We really focused 75 to 80% of those installations in areas with high transit ridership and low vehicle ownership. And so we're already turning the dime on that. That is exactly our focus for these locations. So duly noted, and I hope that is useful information to you, sir.
So I think the answer to the question was that no, CMPD has not made any suggestions for how we can improve the safety of actual streets, because the infrastructure is what is dangerous. I'll give a bit of an anecdote. Last week, I actually got a speeding ticket on one of those high injury networks on Sharon Road West, the stretch between South Boulevard to Park Road, right before it turns into Glen Eagles at Quail Hollow. It's in a part of District 6 to the point that was just made, that where you go a half a mile one direction, you do have Quail Hollow. You have people that rely on vehicles. You go a half mile in the other direction to the very borders of District 6 and District 3, you have a light rail station, Sharon Road West. I would probably tell you that the way that you correlate will not work very well in that part of the neighborhood. There are a lot of multifamily residents, working people, students, that it's just not going to match. Now, I will also tell you that giving people a speeding ticket on that network, because that's what the officer told me, that they were on one of these stings or whatever you want to call it, you're not going to make that street safer by giving people speeding tickets for 54 miles per hour and a 35. That's the same stretch of street I was once walking from the light rail with and talking to the Mayor Pro Tem on a phone call one day. She was nervous for me because she thought I was on a racetrack. That's what it sounded like, walking the half a mile from that light rail station to my home on a 35 mile per hour street, which if you've ever driven it, if you've driven it 35 miles per hour, you're probably in danger. So I don't know, what we are considering here. Again, especially in the context of the conversations around the 2040 plan, we know we can't enforce our way out of this. We've built ourselves into this, so I think we should have a conversation in safe communities for what is the investment look like to actually make the infrastructure safer, and which is the cause. And I've spent time in Engine 16 that has responded over and over to T-bone accidents on Sharon Road West. I've run into them on my way home. How do we get that information from our organizations to really quantify, to know the type of investments that we need to make these streets safer, and apply that to the budget process? I think it'll be a great exercise as we're about to go into an early budget process in the end of October. So I would say before 60 days, what can we do going into that if this council is really serious about making investments to make our streets safer? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winston. Mr. Phipps?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to turn your attention to, I guess, page 22. Is that slide 22? 12. The driver feedback signs. Do you consider these driver feedback signs to be effective, an effective tool for traffic mitigation?
It varies, sir, depending on the location. We always pull that data and investigate that and analyze that to see if it was effective in a particular location or not. So I would say that it varies, but we typically see when the signs are first placed in that location, we see speeds drastically drop because it's something new that the drivers see. It draws their attention. To pay attention to not only the sign, but their own speed in relation to that sign. And we do see it have a calming effect on traffic, but once it normalizes, we see folks kind of returning back to their old habits and old driving habits. So the answer is yes. Initially, we do see improvements in those areas, but those improvements wane after a while. So that's why we utilize the portable ones so we can move that around and have that calming effect in various locations in the city.
Okay. So given the growth of the city, number of drivers, I'm just wondering, why do we only have 2? Given the size of Charlotte and this whole region and the problems we're having with speeding and traffic behavior, seems like 2 for a city our size is just, I don't know. It doesn't seem adequate to me.
So we have 2 at the police department. CDOT has access to 15 additional. And just prior to the meeting, we were discussing the possibility of purchasing some additional units for both organizations. So there's a total of 17 available across the city with more hopefully on the way, sir.
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's better. So, Major Johnson, in the past, you have spoken, I guess, critically of speed light cameras. I thought I heard you one time say that they cause more rear end traffic accidents because people, come to an intersection and see that and slam on the brakes and voila, they're rear ended. Do we have any metrics on that, any history of showing the incidents of that happening when we did have the speed light cameras?
Yes, actually, on slide
or red light camera
19. Yeah, we can go to slide 19. If you'll see, there was an increase in that first chart you see there for the 3 years during the operation of the red light cameras. There was an increase from 258 to 322 in rear end collisions. That's the stat that I referenced during the last presentation, I believe.
So in your opinion, then, that you would characterize that as a spotty performance on the red light cameras? Would you be in favor of trying, if we could get special legislation or whatever, would you see that as something that would help us out, or would you think that it would still result in some of these rear-end crashes that would mitigate any kind of advantage we would have in getting this type of equipment technology?
I honestly, sir, I believe the results are mixed at best. We would certainly be open to, exploring additional data. But the investment that obviously that the city would have to make in that program and the negotiations that would need to be accomplished with the school board certainly play into that decision. But any technology that we encounter that we're proposed with that we think ultimately results in a safer Charlotte, CMPD is 100% for, regardless of the maybe legislative roadblocks that might stand in front of us. We support it if we can show that it makes the streets safer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. Major, the name Hunter comes up there. Are you Major Hunter?
No, sir, that's Brandon Hunter. He's on our PIO office.
What's your name, please?
Dave Johnson.
Johnson. Thank you, sir. Ms. Ajmir, I was pleased to hear you refer to a broken record in your comments, because I've used that expression sometimes and worried a little bit about whether there are members of council who don't know what a record is. So glad to hear a younger person refer to that. On the presentation, appreciate everything you've done and what you've told us. I have a general impression that it illustrates how difficult these issues are, frankly. Your reference to the fact that it looks like our 2021 fatality rate is on track with 2020, so we can't point to any improvement yet as a result of the things that we've done so far. And the other data on the traffic cameras, I've talked to officers in the past when these conversations were taking place before, and the input has always been the same. And it's not just a cost question. I mean, if we thought we could actually avert accidents or even save lives by spending money, I think, we would consider it. So it's not a requirement that this program be self-financing, but the point is that the value just wasn't there based on the data that I heard about in the past. So what I'm waiting for is when we get to the point where we have enough numbers and hard data to start reaching conclusions about what works and what doesn't. We've had some anecdotal information here, which, if anything, does not point to a particularly successful feature of the different things that we're doing. Do you know when we're going to have enough numbers and information to be able to say this made a measurable difference, this did not make a measurable difference, and where we should focus our energies?
I would say one place that we could look for some additional data would be these cities that are currently operating red light cameras and have been for some time. I would think that their data set would be of a size that we could make some educated decisions.
Mr. Johnson, I'm not referring to the red light cameras. I recognize that conversation reached a certain conclusion. That's one topic. What I'm talking about is the other measures that we are now pursuing as a result of Vision Zero, and wanting to get to a point where we can take the outlays, the money that we're spending, and we can show the things that we've done with the money, and we can show based on observable statistics which things have been effective and which ones haven't, in the same way that you've shown us some numbers here to indicate the effect of red light cameras and things. So, because what I'm not getting yet from this presentation is a sense of how much success we've had, or what has been successful, or when we will know what is successful.
Councilmember Driggs, Debbie Smith here. Would love to jump in and maybe help to answer that question. As we are deploying devices, let's say leading pedestrian intervals, some of the pedestrian beacons, we do have an opportunity to go back in and look at the crash data. That's the beauty of Charlotte handling the processing of that data. So we can put our hands on that and come back to you with some measurable improvements where we put in these devices and talk specific locations.
Thank you. We may not have enough data yet, but I'm just saying I look forward to reaching a point where we have enough experience with these different measures to start making a distinction between the ones that are most effective and the ones that are less effective. I would comment also that this subject of street racing came up. That has been an acute issue, particularly in the context of COVID for the last year. I think CMPD has done a great job in specifically addressing that. But the things we're trying to improve with this program are the longer term ones. So we may see a time when COVID is no longer affecting traffic, when the roads aren't as wide open and the street racing situation subsides a bit. But the data from the past that you've shown us and the concerns that we have for the future relate to the steady state, longer term kind of behavior on the roads. And I would just note personally, I think distracted driving is a huge problem. I'm just astonished that when I drive around and I look out of my car at people who are watching movies on their phones while they're driving or they're texting, and I can't believe that that doesn't give rise. In fact, a long time ago, I was rear-ended in my own car by somebody who had a cell phone in his hand and didn't notice that the light had changed. So I think, though, one of the difficulties, again, Major Johnson, is if somebody calls you and says, I just saw a guy speeding, and you noted it's very hard to take that guy, you are also not able, based on a report of a license number and a violation, to take any action, right? Because you have to have seen it in order to be able to do anything about it?
That's correct, sir. Yes, an officer would have to observe that violation in order to take any enforcement action.
All right. Anyway, thank you for your work. And again, look forward to getting to the point where we can really start pulling this apart based on numbers.
Agreed. Thanks, sir.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Driggs, for those questions. And I just want to go back to something that Debbie Smith said earlier. If you start to think about Vision Zero, it was, and I remember when we signed up as one of the cities, one of the few cities in the country that became a Vision Zero city, and a lot of it was around a new way of looking at crash data and fatalities. And I will say that we're only a few years into this process. 2 million was in 2018, the first time. We put another 2 million in 2020. In the 2022 bond, we're proposing 4 million. So a lot of I guess the technology that is being deployed will provide data for the council to make more informed decisions. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It was a great presentation. My question is for you, Madam Mayor. In that referral to the Safety Committee, could a part of that referral be to take a look at technology or something to address the drag racing? Because we've heard, we all know that is one of our major citizen complaints. So is there something more that we can focus on as a committee to try to address this issue?
So as I've been listening, I think that we can modify the agenda or the charge as we gain more conversation around, for example, your suggestion on how do we deal with street racing, I believe kind of fits with Mr. Winston. Empty, long stretches of concrete are like building a drag strip. I mean, it is, and it's our street design that doesn't take curves. The way that we've built so many things that it allows for those opportunities. The way we've built, you can go fast and then run off the exit and disperse pretty quickly. All of those are kind of design issues. I think that this would fit very much in that, and we'll adjust the charge for looking at the design of streets as well. So I think that looking into that, how do our streets contribute to some of these practices. Now, I think that street racing is a COVID phenomenon. We've had it before. I guess if you've lived here long enough, we used to have it. It would always come in peaks and valleys. It's just kind of one of those things that occurs. I don't know why, but I think that we could look at some of that and see how those designs result in those kinds of opportunities to race. So we'll look at that. I'm going to go to Mr. Eggleston, if Ms. Johnson is complete and done before. Okay. All right. Mr. Eggleston.
Thank you. So a couple things. One, I think to the point around street design, I do think it's something that we need to take up. I think street design would, in my opinion, fall more squarely in our Transportation and Planning Committee, where I think the conversation in the Safety Committee should be more focused on the enforcement piece. But design piece to me would be a better referral to Transportation Planning, just my personal opinion. I hope that, and I appreciate what the manager said, we are putting money into these efforts and these priorities where it has not been done prior. I hope that as he starts, whenever he starts his draft manager's budget, that we continue to see that prioritization and potentially an increase, because I think given the amount of feedback you're getting from council tonight and the amount of feedback we get from citizens on a daily basis around all of these issues, and they're all intertwined, but each a bit different. This is one of, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, this is one of the top, 2 or 3 issues in our city, I think, that concern people and that impact quality of life. So, I understand the reasons we're not doing some of the camera stuff anymore. I do think that as we look at things like, I believe, $4,500 poles that read out people's speed as they go by, and we can move those around pretty quickly and pretty easily, that to me is a pretty small investment for something that it has been said today has demonstrates an impact. So I hope that we are looking at more opportunities for that. I would also wonder if there's opportunities for communities who have neighborhood associations that might want to fund one of these in different places in their neighborhood, or are there opportunities to use neighborhood matching grants for something like this if the community wanted to do so, so that the community could deploy them even in an instance where there is not maybe the statistical data to support it as a priority area in comparison to other parts of the city, but neighbors might see the value in it. Can they do that on their own, or could we help them do that with grants? So I do hope that, I do think we need to see more enforcement on particularly high speed. I believe it was said earlier that we don't make our streets safer by writing people tickets. I think that was a lead up to we need to design better streets, and I agree with we need to design better streets. I think we're doing that on Friday. I'd love to have y'all join me at the opening of the Parkwood Road Diet project that has a protected bike lane and has taken 1 lane of travel out of each direction of Parkwood between Davidson and the Plaza, an area where a cyclist was killed just a couple of years ago because people drove up and down it like idiots and at 20 plus miles an hour over the speed limit. So we are implementing those sorts of changes. I think we need to do more of it, and we need to do it as quickly as possible. But there was a wreck on a residential street this weekend where 2 sports cars were racing. One ran off the road, I believe ran into the side of a house or the front of a house, completely totaled the car. Had there been someone walking on the sidewalk that's right there, they'd be dead. So, there are plenty of people driving 10 miles an hour with the speed limit around Charlotte, and I wish they wouldn't, but that's not the problem. The problem is we have people that drive like complete morons at 30 and 40 miles an hour over the speed limit, and not just on our interstates, but on our residential streets. We have a colleague whose family was victim to something like that. So I don't know how much more evidence we need to justify putting more money and more enforcement efforts behind slowing people down. And I do believe that writing tickets will make our streets safer, because after a couple of those tickets, when your insurance starts to go up, that's what changes your behavior. I'm sure most of us got more speeding tickets as young people than we do at this point in our lives, because at some point when you start paying the insurance bill, it's double or triple what it used to be. You start being a little more mindful about how you drive. So I do think the enforcement piece from a ticket writing standpoint can make a difference in addition to everything else we've been talking about. So, but I would encourage, if it's the will of the mayor and majority of my colleagues agree, I think street design is a piece that we should tackle in transportation planning. Thank you.
Mr. Eggleston, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask your indulgence with the staff. While they're talking to other Vision Zero cities and other cities that have this experience, I think it might be good to connect the question of both how do you use technology and have you changed anything in the way you design your streets, and just the beginning as a beginning step. So I'm going to ask if you would continue to include that as we go through this with a specific focus on the Vision Zero cities. So Mr. Phipps, followed by Mr. Winston.
Yeah, I guess we got a report from CMPD where they did street racing intervention activity, and they seized like 60 cars, 60 muscle cars, and it was talk that street racing was dead in Charlotte as a result of this enforcement action. So are we seeing I thought it was quiet for a while, but are we seeing an uptick in it now? And if so, are there plans for a phase 2 effort to do some intervention and car seizures and such as that?
Major Johnson, I think that's for you.
We got it. Thank you, sir, for that question. Yeah, I will say that, yes, we know that there's going to be some maintenance work that needs to be done so that these folks that want to engage in this type of activity know that we haven't backed off or haven't forgotten them. But I'll also add this. We get a lot of complaints that come in as quote unquote street racing. But when we investigate it, we actually find out it's more of just a loud muffler or somebody revving their engine going down the road, which is much harder to address than a location where multiple cars are lining up and racing a quarter mile through a parking lot or down a street. So that's one issue that we have to address is it really a street racing issue, or is it a loud muffler issue, or an upgraded performance exhaust issue that's been added to a vehicle? So there's really, we see that as certainly two different issues. One's certainly a quality of life issue, and one is a safety issue. So we prioritize the safety issue and address the street racing as such.
All right, thank you. Mr. Phipps, you good? Mr. Winston?
Mayor Lyles, we had a conversation a little while ago about, how do we use committees? And how do we keep going and do some of the things that we did around the Comp 2040 plan, and a couple other things earlier this year better. I think Mr. Eggleston brings up a point. This might be a good exercise for that. I would disagree that this isn't just about roads. This is specifically looking through a lens on roads, planning, development, through a public safety lens. I would ask us to keep this recommendation in safe communities, because that is the place where we can interact and are supposed to interact with our emergency services like CMPD, as well as who's missing from here, who responds to traffic accidents, is the fire department. I would even think that perhaps code enforcement would have some type of data to overlay over what makes particular streets in certain parts of town more dangerous than others. So while CMPD, the fire department, and code enforcement I might relinquish their asking them to make recommendations on what we should do to make roads safer, they might be able to give us information and data on what makes these particular roads in certain parts of town dangerous. And then the committee can refer back to council that information, and we can send something if we do decide that we want to make a plan, or we want some type of policy action around that data that we get, or the suggestions that we get. That goes to TAP. So that we have some of that pre-work, some of that very relevant work under subject areas that uses a comprehensive approach of all of our work over time.
You know, I want to say yes. I also want to say we need to get some information done. I'm wondering if I can ask the fire department to actually give us some information about what they see as they travel around our streets, dangerous streets. We have to define some of that.
Because I would say that I spent some time this summer going to firehouses, and I went to the ones that had the highest call rates, response rates, and they have a lot of information about what's happening in neighborhoods and why these things are happening that we haven't even touched, and again, enforcement which simply will not solve.
And I agree with you. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't bog down so much as that we don't see this as taking steps forward. So I'm just layering the priority on the Vision Zero work, and then, you know, as you said, add to that work with design, and then use is another thing. And so we can work on that, but let's see if we can get through this in the next 60 days and see what we can add instead of going all out and not having anything until next March. That's kind of the way I see it. So these folks are still working on what we've assigned them to do, and this additional work is additional work, and I'm really grateful for all of you to do that. I'll spend some time with Larkin as well as the manager to get a charge that works for the time frame that we're doing and to meet some of these design things, because I think this is going to be with us for a while. This city wasn't built, it's what, 256 years old now? So we got a lot of time to fix things, a lot of things to fix as a result of that. Okay, I think that's Ms. Watlington. Do you have anything that you wanted to mention? All right, with that, I think everyone, if we are ready to conclude this discussion, we'll go to the next one, which is a presentation, Mr. Jones.
Yes, another item that was asked by several council members, I believe, last month. There's an update on the River District. So I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I'm going to give you a quick update on this project, kind of some of the history of where it was, some of the commitments that were made. We've also asked Crescent Communities to give you a little bit of update on where they are on their project. And then we'll talk about what's to come. This project started 6 years ago, I think, and I was on the development team when it started. And so it was identified as a generational project. It's obviously one that's near and dear to my heart, and I think one that is very unique for our city. It has gone through a lot of twists and turns in the 6 years, but the one thing that's so important is it continues to move forward in the project. Liz, you can come over here if you want to. So we can go to the next slide. That's right. Oh, there we go. So I'll walk you through quickly and remind you, like I said, of the project and then the update from the developer. And there's been some other developments that are adjacent to River District, but not in what I call River District proper. And then we'll also talk about next steps and what's there for you to consider in upcoming meetings. Donata, you may have to help me. Which one? Let's see. Actual page. Sorry, my mistake. So again, to remind everybody, the River District proper, which is what you see up here on the map, was a 2016 rezoning. It was 1,400 acres. We also did a reimbursement agreement in 2017. You have to remember there's no infrastructure out here today with the exception of a dead-end road section of Garrison as well as Dixie River Road and some smaller kind of really secondary or even unpaved roads. So we did the reimbursement agreement in 2017 for West Boulevard. Earlier this year, you have seen the annexation, the first annexation for River District, which is 161 acres. We also brought earlier this year an amendment for the West Boulevard reimbursement agreement, which was to add some more work that was requested by NCDOT. And then we hope that later this year, we actually will have the groundbreaking for West Boulevard. West Boulevard is the core of kind of getting everything started. In addition to that, we also had to consider water and sewer. Again, there's nothing out there. So there was a large large journey, I will, or large undertaking to get to a point where you're actually going to start to see things happen out there. And we're finally moving that forward. This sheet is a phased approach to how we thought we might address some of the roads out there. And West Boulevard, just to orient you a little bit, is the road in orange that's in the middle that runs right and left. The far road on the left edge with the purple and the orange is Dixie River Road. And again, that is, and green, I should say at the bottom, that is out there today. And then the road that kind of runs to the top and the bottom in the middle, that is green at the bottom, then purple, then orange, and then purple again, is Garrison Road. And those are kind of the three primary roads that we've been looking on. This phased approach that you see here was really starting in the core and then kind of working our way out as development occurred around it. This pretty much still stays intact. However, we are looking at opportunities where the market presents itself. And that's what you'll see next is the next project that we'll bring forward to council, I'll hit it again at the end, is the southern section of Garrison Road, all the way from Dixie River at the bottom of your screen up to the yellow of West Boulevard. So as a part of the rezoning, there were over 30 commitments that were made. And I think this, when people have asked for updates, this is a lot of what you're looking for. Where do we stand on these things? The affordable housing, there was a commitment of 365 units. The initial development has land that's donated and a development partner selected in Laurel Street. And they have started that process. I know H&S is considering the project and hope if the fundings come through that it would be in late 2023. As I mentioned earlier, there's also the extension of water and sewer lines. We had committed in the rezoning to reserve 2 school sites. We've provided options. They have provided options. See, old habits don't break. They have provided options for those school sites as well as neighborhood park sites. They also discussed a dedicated land for Beaver Dam Creek Greenway, and that land would be dedicated as a part of Phase 1. And site options were also provided to CMPD for a police station. In addition to these, we also had a site for a fire station. Lily's has been working closely with that on options for that site. And then public access to the riverfront. That will be a later phased commitment, but it will come as prior to this CO for the 1,000th residential unit in the MX district, which is more of the residential part of the development. There are locations for CATS bus stops and a plan for a 1.5 acre transit center, and we've provided locations to CATS for that. And then there's erosion control, water quality monitoring, as well as a 75 acre wildlife preserve and a total tree save. And all of those, again, are future phase or ongoing throughout construction. So now I want to invite Chase Curley to come in from Crescent Communities and really give you a little bit more of that developer perspective of what they are working on out there.
Great. So you can confirm you can hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thanks, Tracy. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor and council members. My name is Chase Curley. I'm a managing director for Crescent Communities, and I've been leading our efforts with the River District since its rezoning in 2016. If you could go to the next page. I welcome the opportunity to really kind of go through where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. You could skip to the next
Donata,
page.
I don't have it.
Wendy,
So
you're
I
going to have
want
to
to
advance
start
the slides.
with the soul of the city and the heart of nature. Our vision for this development stems from this statement, and everything we've designed and intended to build flows through these words. The River District is going to be a vibrant, diverse place that fosters unprecedented economic vitality, offering a full range of residential and commercial opportunities, surrounded by hundreds of acres of preserved open space. Unlike anywhere else in Charlotte, this location and its master plan that will be shown here shortly captures a lot of the natural beauty that extends from the Catawba River to the west, and then maximizing the convenience to the global reach of Charlotte Douglas.
Chase, give us just 1 second. There we go.
Perfect. So a master plan like this, and the scale is going to build out over many years, where markets, needs, and design will change over time. So it's important that we have a flexible plan that's resilient, but thoughtful enough to establish a clear direction and strategy. And a lot of the fundamentals within the rezoning does provide these different development districts in order to kind of control growth, establish where identity of various uses will be, and it takes into account location analysis such as 485, Catawba River, and kind of the in-between. But this master plan is really going to be a refreshing alternative to the traditional use suburban model. It's designed to the human scale rather than the automobile, which I think it sounds like it's an important aspect of some concerns that was expressed tonight. A connected network of homes, retail, shop, restaurants, office buildings, schools, public spaces, all with the allure of the parks and trails. So starting towards the east, closest to 45, that's where we envision more of a diverse employment center for a broad spectrum of office opportunities ranging from small options. Then as you head west, this will transition into a more commercial gateway corridor along West Boulevard for site uses, small office, and retail, where as that intersects with the road that runs north to south with Dixie River Road, will create a vibrant collection of intertwined residential and commercial uses. And as in that transitions closer to the river, I'll have more of a residential focus. You can skip to the next plan. So one of the experience principles that how we've thought about the River District is to provide a uniquely compelling connection to nature and outdoors. One of the commitments within the rezoning was for 40% of the 1,400 acres to be reserved for common open space. So the rendering on the left is our green space map. It's a framework for which we intend to draw connections for those that work and live out here towards interactions with and through nature. It shows how we intend to build the built environment, which in this example, we've turned the roads and the rooftops off so that you see the light, and bringing the open space, forest, trails, the parks, and the space so you can begin to see really how we interlive the connective tissue of the built environment in with nature. If you go to the next page, it kind of has a list of a few things that we have brought forward. So, there's within the land that we own today, there will be about 460 acres of preserved common open space, 2.5 miles that I'll show in a minute of protected bike lanes, 2.5 miles of riverfront frontage, nearly 30 various parks. And parks can mean a lot of different things, from ½ acre to 5 to 10 acres. We've got 3 different water access points, 14 miles, well, actually, it's closer to 20 miles of bike and pedestrian trail, of which we've built 8 of those to date through a partnership through Parks and Rec and with Carolina Trailblazers. And then a 2-acre sustainable farm, and then 3.5 miles of more greenway. If you will go to the next page. So as Tracy mentioned, none of this really could be, that we've designed could be imagined without the right infrastructure planning. And the beginnings and long-term success that the River District was founded upon was a partnership between Crescent and the City of Charlotte. And so here are these 4 active infrastructure projects that we've gone into partnership with to advance both water, sewer, and roads. And as Tracy mentioned, the most gatekeeping element of the River District is West Boulevard, shown in red. We entered into this agreement back in 2019, and skipping steps and fast forwarding to now, we have completed the 100% construction plans and contract documents with the expectation of going out to bid this year with a groundbreaking as early as this year as well. What's shown in green is the Beaver Dam Creek sewer trunk extension, which we did complete that recently. That's been fully built. It's going through the finalization steps. And then we've also begun design of a second leg of sewer that will advance the employment district in yellow. And last, we've got the Dixie River Road water line shown in blue, which that project has been fully engineered and is in the process of purchasing easements and right-of-way, which should start construction by the beginning of next year. The next page, Tracy mentioned this is just an illustration of where we have had properties that have been annexed overlaid on the master plan, just so you can get a sense of where we're going to start. The most of this does comprise of the West Boulevard roadway extension, and which I'll show shortly will be our first phase of development. To the next page. Tracy mentioned earlier there's going to be a significant amount of roadway improvement this area over time, but what I wanted to show here represents where we are going to have road improvements take shape next year. Red is West Boulevard, but purple will be Dixie River Road, which will front our first phase. And just to give you a sense as far as what will get built, to the bottom is a cross-section of the roadway design that both West Boulevard and Dixie River Road, for all of its frontage within the River District, will get built towards. So it's a 2-lane median divided road section. And as I've heard tonight, the focus in around having, friendly, vibrant, but safe pedestrian environments, that's what this road section is built on. So you can see that each side of West and Dixie River Road will have 6-foot bike lanes and an 8-foot pedestrian pathway that's brought outside of the road. So this will invite a more safer pedestrian interaction, both for the cyclists and for the vehicular traffic. There we go. So, how a project of this scale begins it will set the trajectory and expectations of what the future can offer, for many years. And given that this project will take many years, we do not want to step forward tepidly. So we have placed a lot of thought and care into planning the first phase, and we are excited to share that with you tonight. So there are 2 areas that we're going to develop first, and both of which are activated along the West Boulevard corridor. As soon as construction for West Boulevard will begin, which could be, again, as early as end of this year, we'll begin construction of a 70-acre mixed-use development. It's called West Row, centered in blue. It's our vision that the intersection of West and Dixie River Road will be the center of gravity for this project, and so what better place for us to start than there. West Row is really going to be a truly mixed-use development that blends the diversity and density of the urban living with a range of residential offerings, retail, restaurant, event space, and office space, with the proximity to the trails and parks as we've shown. Also anchored with a 2-acre professionally managed working farm. There'll be a mix of rental and for sale options. Crescent's novel brand will build market rate apartments towards the end of next year. And as Tracy mentioned, we have partnered with Laurel Street, local Charlotte-based affordable housing developer, which we will donate the land for them to build their 124 affordable apartments. Diversity and inclusion is very important to Crescent and the River District. And, we really wanted to show a clear sign of alignment towards the housing solutions on day one. And send the right signal saying that this is the first phase. It is going to be the most vibrant, and it's one that we feel should offer the most diversity. We should be receiving the final land development permits for these 70 acres the next few weeks and begin construction there. And then separately, as West Boulevard, matures a little further, we will begin construction of a 150,000 square foot office building shown in the top right. This building will serve really as the beginning of what will amount to as much as 8 million square feet of office. Much of what Crescent will lead, so the beginning of this gateway at the intersection of 45 and West Boulevard will be very important for us to drive strong job creation and the foundation to build towards a much diverse and resilient office submarket, which leads into the last slide. So, Crescent and Lincoln Harris originally partnered in 2015 for the River District. And this consisted of 1,000 acres that Crescent currently owns in purple, and then another 400 acres that Lincoln Harris had assembled in the rezoning that was owned by a collection of others. And the River District was later rezoned in 2016. And since then, Crescent has led all the master planning, public-private partnership projects, development planning, the rezoning commitments, and related design aspects of the River District for what's been presented today amongst many other initiatives. We've separately grown our position within the River District from the 1,000 acres shown in purple to what now amounts to just over 1,300 acres of land shown on the right. We don't have plans to stop there. Crescent, will not develop all the River District itself. We will partner with others on land that we own, and certainly as new projects are brought forward within the project or within its perimeters, we will work collectively to make sure that this project is built upon the vision of a sustainable, diverse, and inclusive, but yet highly desirable mixed-use community. The River District will be an icon for Charlotte, example of great placemaking, a place immersed in nature with the soul and experience of the city, and we look forward to continued partnership with the city and all the many stakeholders involved as we continue to lead the transformation of the western side of Charlotte. So with that, I've got this is just a rendering of the Westro, showing where Dixie River Road is on the right, as West Boulevard will traverse through the middle, and then all the various mixed-use apartments, rental, single-family, and retail anchored by the farm towards the back. And then just a rendering of our office that, again, will take shape towards the end of next year. We've talked a little bit about the schedule. West Boulevard is nearly permitted. Construction should begin anytime soon now. We appreciate your patience. Beaver Dam Creek Sewer, that's been built. The water line is about to start as well along Dixie River Road, which will then be kind of the precedent beginnings to all the densification and beginnings of Westro and many phases to come.
And I will finish this up on this last slide. Chase, thank you very much. What you will see coming to you all again soon in the upcoming weeks is a reimbursement agreement for that section that I mentioned of Garrison. West Boulevard is up here. I don't know if we can move that. Thanks, Donata. So West Boulevard work that Chase mentioned is occurring right here, right now. Today, Garrison kind of comes off of the interchange and runs down and dead ends about right here. This property was rezoned earlier this year by McCraney, another developer. But as a part of that in the agreement, we have worked to have them do the Garrison connection all the way to Dixie River. And this is an important connection because it has another creek crossing. Right now, if you were on Dixie River, the outlet malls are right here. Bearwick is right down here. If you were to try to get up to this interchange, you'd have to take Dixie River up over 485 and then back down. So West Boulevard and this connection back up to the West Boulevard interchange are critical ones that we think are needed. So you will see council action for $8.5 million of previously approved bond dollars to do this Garrison Road work, and also following that will be the annexation of that property as well. And with that, I know that was a lot. I'll stop for any questions that you might have for myself or Chase. And I've also asked Lily Folks-John from my team to be on. She is the day-to-day of the project.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. I do appreciate you, Chase. I know that we have spoken a few times in regards to this, and you keeping me abreast. So I've just got a couple here. The first one is, can you remind me, what is the total anticipated public investment for the phases?
It's hard to say that it's anticipated. I think what we've been kind of doing is taking them piece by piece. Obviously, as we dig into some of this road work, the costs change, and so we didn't have necessarily an allocated cost for each piece of it. We had, I think, at one point in time, estimated about 30 million out there between West Boulevard, Garrison, Dixie River. You know, what that looks like and how that is, whether we do tax increment grants, whether we do CIP, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at that. Or whether we do it through future zoning, different ways.
Okay, I'd like to get an understanding of what we think that looks like right now, because I'd like to be able to quantify the public benefit versus the public investment. I saw the menu of items that you all have worked on to ensure that there is a public benefit. I just want to get a feel for what that return on investment looks like for us. As I think about that, in particular to affordable housing, I'm happy to see, obviously, the Laurel Street project in phase one. My question there is 124 units that will be anticipated affordable. Of how many units total in the development?
Well, the zoning is allowed for flexibility for the lot and different types of densification. So it's entitled for as many as 5,000 single-family and rental apartments, which I believe is there's a 10% commitment for affordable housing. If I'm correct.
That's what I recall.
So there will be, as densification occurs, there will be future phases of affordable housing.
Okay, so you said 10% overall we should expect. So this Laurel Street project with the 124 units is the first one, but there's more coming? Okay.
There are future phases, yes.
Okay, and of that, are there home ownership opportunities?
We did not.
I can't speak for Laurel Street, but there will be future, like I said, future phases of affordable housing that could come through, whether or not it's single family for sale or for rent. It's kind of to be determined.
Or even multifamily for sale, whatever that looks like. I would love to see what that could look like in the future, because we understand that this one's going to be, like you said, generational. And so if there's a way that we can ensure that there will be some kind of generational wealth that can be accrued by population that wouldn't otherwise be able to move into the River District, I'd love to see how we are proactive about that. So we appreciate, of course, any affordable housing opportunity, but if we can get folks a chance to really have some economic mobility through this, that would be preferred. To that end, can you?
And we're also doing that through just some of the sizing of the homes, where much smaller housing does create a much more affordable option, whether or not it's preventive or not. But we are looking at other ways other than just making the commitment that way. So finding other ways to create more affordable housing product within the project through lot size and square footage pricing.
To that point, that was going to be my next question, Chase. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you think that mix is going to look like at this point?
Yeah, well, if you go to up a few slides, Tracy, to the Westro land plan, you can see, there's only 100 single-family and townhomes provided here, of which we have 3 different townhome product types and 3 different single-family product types. So, of that, there's a very wide, and this is just the first phase for the actual single family, but we will have a wide array of product types, here already offering 5 different types just within 100 homes.
Okay, and then a little bit to that end, there's the housing side, but then there's also the economic development side of this project. So I'm wanting to know if you can cover the MWSBE approach to ensure that this project provides some opportunities for our MWSBE businesses. I know that I and Councilmember Winston were able to attend your diversity supplier event a couple of weeks ago. And so thank you for the work that you're doing there. I'd like to understand a little bit more about how you all are thinking about that.
So through the rezoning, there was a commitment where all public infrastructure did have a 10% MWSB commitment, and Crescent made a goal to establish where all the private infrastructure would also have that 10% MWSB goal as where we can control, where Crescent is going to actually build. And, just within this first phase, the only thing that we have designed to date that we put out to bid, other than the public infrastructure, is this site work, of which we did make a commitment through that bid process of requiring a 10% MWSB participation.
And of that 10%, how much is M, how much is W?
I'll have to, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, if you could get that back to us, that'd be great. And then my last question is, as far as that one parcel that you all don't yet have control over, I saw that there were quite a few paths, like Greenwood Pass and bike trails through it. If you could go back to that slide. That's got the,
Well, I believe that's the city of Charlotte property.
okay.
It
is? Okay.
It's Charlotte Water's property where they have a future facility design for that. But there's an agreement between Parks and Rec and the Carolina Trailblazers to use that property for different activation purposes now.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
I don't recall, Ms. Watlington, and I think that there was some agreement around the Charlotte Water property as well, and I don't know I can't recall the details, but there is some agreement that's in the rezoning as a result of this.
So we didn't have an agreement in the rezoning. Chase, not to put words in your mouth, I just remember this one dearly. We did have a lot of conversation at the time with Charlotte Water about their need for that property. It's several hundred acres. We have talked to them about their need is more on the back end of the property, and we have talked to them about what we can do to keep the consistency, or what Crescent can do to keep the consistency of Dixie River Road and the road frontage on that front piece of it, and then they could utilize the back piece if they needed to.
So it's still going to maintain its city ownership?
Right now,
okay,
that Charlotte Water's indicated they do not
That's
want
what
to
I
dispose
recall
of.
from it, so. Okay, Ms. Ajmera?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions. What's the status of two bridges across the Catawba River to the River District?
What's the distance between which one? I'm sorry.
I'm interested in the status of those two bridges.
I
Across
believe
the,
they're the Catawba Crossing.
yes.
So the Catawba Crossing was identified as a state project. There was a variety of support for the project. I think there was a need. It was originally a much larger project, but the Catawba Crossing itself still sits out there as a potential future state project. It has not moved forward in my knowledge. Chase, do you have any other knowledge of it?
I know Gaston County has made a strong organizational effort to put it back on the map. Otherwise, and there is a committee that's been steering some of the design for where the alignment would be. So it has surfaced back, but where it's going or exactly is right now, I can't comment on.
Yeah, so I think this could be a follow-up, Tracy. If you can get a report on the bridge project from the two MPOs that are planning this, since this does impact two counties, this project might qualify for a higher priority in NCDOT. And to follow up on that, how does that affect our Silver Line planning or the plans in future? And then one more question to that as well. Can we secure the space for open space and city property? So this could be, you can answer it now if you have it. If not, this could be part of our follow-up report. Thank you.
So I'll just really quickly say I don't think it has any impact to the first question, Councilmember Ajmera. I don't think it has any impact to the Silver Line discussions. On the open space, on the city-owned property, I think that's a discussion with Charlotte Water. We can have at a future date. I mean, the property right now is open space. It actually has bike trails on it. And is used somewhat as recreation until the time that Charlotte Water potentially could need the property.
Can you show the earlier map?
There we go.
Okay, so that area is quite large. Okay, that's
I
all.
believe Charlotte Water wants to be, a participant in the regional planning for this area. And there have been, given that we have been through the, years and wait through the design aspect, how they would commit towards that property and other future uses was they were hesitant until they knew how things were going to evolve. And so I believe there are a number of questions they had with regards to where there were going to be roadway impacts and essentially what would be remaining for their future water intake resource. And I think that is evolving. And so there's more data points that can kind of help identify what may be beneficial for common open space and, public access and use in addition to the infrastructure needs that Charlotte Water has. But that, I believe, beginning with West Boulevard will be a point where those projects are approved, where the alignment of the future West Boulevard extension could have some more informing bits of data for Charlotte Water to begin to make decisions.
And I just want to reiterate really quickly, Charlotte Water's been a great partner. I mean, we've looked at that property a lot of different ways. Did they need it or not need it? If they need it, how do we work with it to also make it work within the River District vision? So they've been a really good partner along the way.
All right, Ms. Ajmera, if we're ready to move on, we'll go to Mr. Winston.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Winston?
Yeah, I have 4 questions. This Charlotte Water use, generally speaking, do we know what it is, and specifically, is there a possibility of a wastewater treatment plant being put there?
It was a water intake facility.
Water intake, okay. Thank you. I think this question is probably for Mr. Jones. It might be Ms. Dodson as well. I was one of the council members that asked for an update on this. And it specifically came after conversation actually with the fellows at Fire Station 33. Obviously, as Ms. Watlington knows, the west side of town has been growing immensely. And it is some of those, that company in particular was concerned. They had questions. They not necessarily concerned, but they wanted to know about the progress of the River District and how operations might or might not be affected going forward. That part of town is increasingly stressed with medic calls, medic holds, and responses to the airport, and so on and so forth. So, and I know that you said this plan was developed over 6 years ago, and the West Side continues to grow above and beyond expectations, I feel like. So when was the emergency service plan kind of developed, and how does that, from a process standpoint, get updated over time? Because I see that we have some land that was given to CFD, but that doesn't necessarily talk about how we serve the area, the greater area at large around it and deal with that growth.
So, Councilmember Winston, I'll try to answer your question. So there was in this budget that you just approved, under our COPS program, we had capacity to renovate or build several new fire stations. That would be one of the questions we would have for the chief in terms of what's the best use of these resources in terms of being able to address capacity issues. So yes, we do have funds in this budget under the COPS program to build and renovate fire stations.
Well, I guess that's part of it. It's not, I guess the question would be, what are, and like you said, this is probably a question for the chief, right? What are we funding and why? Like how, like what were we thinking about 6 years ago versus how are we thinking about it now, from an emergency service perspective, I guess. I'd love to talk about that a little later. So this is a public-private partnership. But this public-private partnership was developed, as you said, the planning phase. The plans were developed 6 years ago. And I would say that that's before we as a city began to put a more intentional equity lens on land development in particular. How are we now applying that lens to the River District, especially as you say, we haven't totally decided how or figured out how the public investment is going to go?
So I think one of the things that we identified early on is that this is not a one and done, right? As I said at the beginning, this is a generational project. And so in order to get this right, there has to be a commitment between the city side and the private sector side to continue the dialogue. And so just like the fire station, 4 years ago when we were kind of saying, well, where should the fire site be? Or the CFD site be? And when should it come online? Like, we didn't have the answer to that. And so there's constant ongoing conversations. I think that, as priorities change and time goes on, the next go around of public investment with Crescent and their portion of River District is the opportunity to bring in that public lens, right? What we did were the first agreements, which was the zoning, which is where we got those 30 plus commitments, right? And then the investment in the West Boulevard section. So this other Garrison Road project is separate from Crescent. That's not Crescent, that will be McCraney. But undoubtedly, not to put words in your mouth, Chase, or suggest that you should be coming back anytime soon, but they will come back because there is more infrastructure that's needed out there. Again, can't reiterate enough, if you go out there, there's nothing there today in terms of the infrastructure that's needed to really see any type of development. So there will be future bites at the apple.
So basically, we got to keep paying attention and keep plugging along. My last question, I guess, would be for Ms. Dodson or Mr. Curley. How and when are citizens, or will they be able to buy into this public-private partnership? When do you foresee, like, when can people start to buy into it? Yeah.
So I would say we're going to have building permits pulled by the end of next year, with rooftops and residents moving in by spring of 2023. And then from there, we've also started, we've talked about the first 2 phases, but we've also kicked off design for the next 3 phases as well. So that will begin to deliver another 300 plus single family homes to the River District.
So that's half the question. You said when they move in, but when will people be able to start buying in, especially kind of thinking about this equity aspect of this? Like you said, this is going to be an attraction, right? This is going to be a part of Charlotte that is going to be hopefully very desirable for all types of people across the spectrum of Charlotteans. I guess kind of what I'm getting at, when is everybody going to be able to buy in, not just people of a certain economic level? When are people from across the income spectrum going to be able to consider to make their home in the River District?
I'd say in the year of 23, and that's when we'll deliver and donate land for affordable housing for our partnership with Laurel Street by the end of next year, when that site work is completed for West Row, and then that's when they'll begin construction for their 124 affordable housing apartments at that point in time. And at the same time, we'll be delivering a range of single-family options that offer a varying degree of price points. This is not to price out the public. This is a public project that, and a lot of the amenity spaces we're delivering are also to be inviting to the public, not just to those that want to live here. From the riverfront park, from the trails to the event center, the 2-acre farm, there's a lot of other benefits that we're delivering on that will be for the public to enjoy and not just live here.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it was part of the original design, and Crescent's done a really great job with this, of that there are multiple price points delivered at every step, and that includes the affordable housing components along the way too. And it was very important in our commitments, again, I'm putting myself back on the original team, very important in the original commitments that we not try to build the place first and then do affordable, is that it was part of the first step. It was ingrained in the DNA of what the place was trying to be.
Thank you.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. That slide is up with the Lincoln Harris area. What is Lincoln Harris's current engagement in the area?
I can't speak for Lincoln Harris directly, but I know that Crescent has taken the lead and assumed many of the roles that they were leading going into the original partnership.
I think that was probably more for Ms. Dodson. Is Lincoln Harris still involved?
As a former employee, I'm going to reiterate, I think what Chase said is that Crescent has really taken the lead on it. You know, Lincoln Harris may still have some relationships out there and have some conversations, but they're not a part of what I would call the core development team that's going to move the overall vision for the way that Crescent is.
So we talked initially about 1,700 acres. Are we now kind of separating what we expected to be the Lincoln Harris piece from the River District conversation?
It was 1,400 acres, just under 1,400 acres, and I think Crescent has, and Chase, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Crescent has picked up a lot of those relationships that Lincoln Harris had on various properties.
But who owns the land that now says Lincoln Harris on that map?
That land's owned by a number of different groups as well as Crescent. So we are under contract to continue to purchase land in the area, and that's what's represented on the right.
And that would be included in the overall vision for the River District? I mean, I'm just trying to get at what the outlook is for what is called Lincoln Harris land on that map under the new regime.
Yeah, so, I mean, the outlook is that we've expanded the control and the footprint of which we're going to develop and deliver the opportunities for the River District, and not have other, partnerships or rely on, not rely, but in order to have a master plan development control, as opposed to there being multiple different developers delivering on multiple different visions. We saw this as an opportunity to contract to purchase the balance of the property, of which we can, and we intend to grow that even further to absorb, should the landowners agree, to deliver more opportunities. But it is to be the lead master planner. It's going to be incredible and important with how this type of project is advanced.
Right, and I think you're great guys for that job, so no problem with that. On the financial side, Tracy, you mentioned $30 million. We actually had, at the time we did the rezoning there, a fairly specific proposal as to the financing. So have we moved beyond what was discussed back in 2016 as far as the public financial commitment is concerned?
You're talking about for what was discussed in 2016 in the public investment was the West Boulevard extension at 16 million. Was it 16.2? Yeah, 16.2 million for that. That was then amended slightly earlier this year to include a little bit of work around the interchange in Garrison, and that was 1.4 million that was added to the 16 million. So that's as far as we've gone on the public investment related to the River District proper. What you will see next is a public-private investment or reimbursement agreement to do Garrison Road that would be done with a separate developer.
So you don't remember that we talked about an overall scope of the public financial commitment back when we did this rezoning in the first place?
Yeah, so we talked, going back then, I think we talked, and I don't remember the specific numbers a little bit. I'm getting old and my memory's not that great anymore. It was like $100 million of total infrastructure that was needed to build out this area. And you may remember, Lily, is more of the number. But then we looked at a public investment number, in the $30 million range over time.
Okay, I don't know if you still have any of the exhibits from back then, but I would just like to be able to make a comparison between the prior council action where we rezoned this and indicated a willingness, a preparedness to do certain financing with where you think we are now. I have to assume with the time that's gone by and the way costs have escalated and things that, we may end up renegotiating some things that we talked about back then, but I'd like to have a clearer understanding of that, maybe offline. My last question quickly was, there were a lot of questions about topography at the time this was done, and it was regarded as quite difficult terrain. So where are you now in terms of, stormwater, wetlands? Have there been any challenges that were not apparent a few years ago that you encountered?
Oh, the latter one is that's a labyrinth. Yes, there's always challenges you enter into a project at this scope and size. But as it relates to the topography, what's shown on the right and the master plan that we've developed does take into account for the existing topography and how we would provide for detention, the additional erosion control measures, our stream buffers, all the additional commitments that we made that were on top of the current ordinance at the time. This does reflect how we see the project being built based on all those conditions that we know to date.
So you were able to work all that out. Great. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Eggleston? Mr. Eggleston?
Thank you. I think one of the common threads of great cities around the world is a really active waterfront, and Charlotte's not historically had that. I'm hoping this will be that, and I'm very excited for it. Thank you for your time tonight and for all of your efforts around making sure this is something for the entire community to benefit from and enjoy, not just the people who live or work there. I've got to imagine if I were building out something of this magnitude, which you described, and I appreciate you describing as diverse, inclusive, iconic, that from a marketing standpoint, it would not be my preference to have the main road running through the development called Dixie. I'm wondering if before so much of this stuff is built out and it becomes even harder to consider, if I know it's come up before, but I'm wondering from a CDOT perspective how far down the path we got in considering whether that could be a road we might change the name of. To me, Dixie River Road sounds like the entrance to like a Dukes of Hazzard theme park, not to something like this. So I don't know if CDOT's got somebody there or if the project team, obviously they just can't unilaterally change a street name that's not solely on their property, but to me, it's not a name worthy of a project like this. So I don't know if there's anybody who might address the possibilities there.
Mr. Eggleston, I think you've got other people that would join in that opinion, but I think that we need to probably find out and make sure we know who would do what. So can we come back to you on that? Billy's saying,
Sure.
Yes, we can. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't figure we'd vote on it tonight. I just thought we might want to consider.
You're not the
it
only
before
one that
they put
expressed
stuff.
that opinion.
Yeah, it'll get harder to do once a lot of stuff is built on it. So,
Right.
That's all. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Phipps?
Yeah, I'm interested in what our CAT's plans for service in this area, and that can be included in any kind of follow-up report as well. I guess they'll have to, it's all contingent on the timeline for densification of the tract that's pretty much vacant right now. But I would be interested in knowing, what are their plans for service in the area with their catch buses and things like that. Thanks.
So I think that, and you can see under the public benefits, we've got the locations for bus stops and a plan for the transit center out there is land being donated. When we, as a council, if I recall, there was a real discussion about affordable housing and jobs and keeping the opportunity for people that would come out here to work to have mass transit or public transit. So hopefully that's in play. We'll have to get some more information as it goes along. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Is there anyone that would like to speak that has not spoken already? If not, we'll close this out with Ms. Watlington.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of follow-up questions as I was listening. I did want to say that Councilmember Driggs' question is along the exact lines that I'm asking when it comes to quantifying the total public investment. So if you could please include me in that discussion when you all have it, I would appreciate it. I did have a question in regards to the river itself. I know there's been some conversation around having so much development that close to the river. Can anyone speak to what kind of mitigation plans we've got in place or how we anticipate protecting our natural resources here?
Chase, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I was waiting for that to be nudged. During the rezoning, we did make commitments that, no housing would front the riverfront as far as what we have here. We also made commitments for additional stream buffers and additional erosion control measures that were on top of the development ordinance at the time. I'm not sure if that ordinance has shifted, but I believe those commitments are further than what they were at the time. We've also made commitments for stream monitorization that we've partnered with Charlotte Stormwater to have different devices within the different streams and tributaries in order to monitor sedimentation, both during rain events and then within the coves to determine whether or not anything was polluted. But those have been in place for about 1.5 years now in order to establish a good baseline. In addition to that, there is very little riverfront frontage other than what's shown on the north and south side of the city land. Otherwise, the balance of it is going to be preserved common open space, or it's recessed off the river quite far.
Okay, thank you. My next question is in regards to the airport and its proximity and flight patterns and that kind of thing. Can you speak to what that conversation has been or what we believe are going to be the impacts of any kind of noise envelope there?
So I'll just tell you really quick, there's a lot of time spent very early on with the airport, flight patterns, as well as conversations with the airlines. And this property is really situated parallel to the runways. And so it doesn't, part of what we talked about early on with the airport was how far south could residential go, and making sure that we were putting residential in designing the plan in residential in places that wouldn't be in the flight path today or even future flight paths as technology change. So if there's only the one runway, the diagonal runway today that will eventually go away. After that, they're all parallel to this development.
Okay. And then finally, speaking of some of the comments around the Dixie River Road, I also support a name change, by the way, and the CATS plan. I just want to understand, how does this integrate into the planning department's work, the Comp 2040 plan, the mobility plans? What has that work look like so far? How are you all working together to ensure there is appropriate integration here?
Chase, do you want to answer that, or Lilius? I've not been involved in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, so we haven't looked at the new comp plan to then identify whether or not there's been any shift in what the plan would be for this area. That's something we can follow up with, though.
Okay, I appreciate that from you, Chase. I want to make sure that internally we're doing that too.
Yeah, and Ty's on tonight, and we had talked about it, so he's available to answer the question, or we can just report it back out to you.
Ty? He's on the meeting right now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, we have not had any conversation with the developers with regards to this. When I say we, the planning team has not had any conversation with regards to this and how it relates to the comprehensive plan and subsequently the UDO. Now, whether the developer and people who work with them participated in the policy map survey that just ended recently, I will not know unless they make us aware of that. But the answer to your question is no, we have not had any conversation as to that. Thank you.
Okay. I would imagine y'all are gonna get together before this comes back to us, just to make sure we've got our lines.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yes.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
Yeah, Tracy, maybe you can clarify this. And Councilmember Ejmier brought it up. There were two bridges for the Catawba crossing, but one of them was a plan from Gaston County on the southern part that would go into the River District. And there's some confusion as to whether or not Charlotte, through the MTC, passed a resolution to approve that, or is that what's still a Gaston County plan that they very much want, but I didn't think it really had moved forward.
So you'll see the bridge right here. That's the right of way for the Catawba crossing right there. Chase, you may have to jump in, or Lilia's too, because again, my memory's foggy. We had talked about a joint resolution between Mecklenburg County and Gaston County on the bridge. The bridge was, if you can remember, somewhat contentious at points on the support for it. So I don't know that it's moved forward any discussions of late on either side. I think Chase said earlier Gaston is still pushing for it.
Right, but did Mecklenburg take any steps to say we support this idea, the concept through the MTC vote, or?
I think in the MPO, and I'll go back and look, I think in the MPO, we supported the resolution.
So CARTPO did?
I think so, but.
That's what I think the bridge was discussed as a part of CARPO. It would not be discussed because it would have to have a transit plan to go over it, which there is not for MTC to even consider it.
Yeah.
So that just doesn't, in 2 years that I've been on MTC, I don't recall a discussion. But on CARPO, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I do remember the bridge, and this Gaston County has some differences in where the bridge ought to go.
Right,
And there are two different groups working on it, but it's all about the economic development in Gaston County. And I believe the CARPO said, when you figure out what you want to do with your land use, then come and talk about the bridge.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering, because being on CARPO, I don't remember that this is queued up or that anything moved forward. So that's what I'm just trying to understand, if there was some action on Mecklenburg's part to vote to support it or whatever, but I understood that it was purely a Gaston County.
So on my days on CARPO, which would have been prior to coming back to the city, there was a resolution, the mayor said it. We kind of locked in on this side of it, right, of where the bridge location would be, and kind of, to the mayor's point, said on the Gaston side, this is where it has to connect to on the Mecklenburg side. But I think it was the larger desire of the priority of the project and where that fell in CARPO versus Gaston's MPO too.
So otherwise, really the crossing is the new 85 bridge. Would that be correct? That would be the access, the replacement of the 85 bridge.
The 85 bridge, you're talking about Wilkinson?
It's much further north.
But that's the only access, right? Right. I mean,
Right now, yes.
There's
yes.
no other plan really that's moved forward to give more access into the River District from Gaston County.
From Gaston County, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I
Sometimes
follow
tough
up
to
on
keep
that?
up with, who is that?
That's Ms. Ajmera.
Who's Ms. Ajmera?
Yes, so, this property is the only property for the bridge. And I guess how do we make sure that we protect this property for Charlotte?
So one thing I'll say quickly, and you see it in this plan, the right-of-way was protected as a part of the zoning. In addition, there was a significant amount of work that was done during the rezoning to determine how the Catawba crossing would then connect to 485 and even on the other side, on the south side of the airport. And so a lot of kind of planning for that has been done until it becomes a actual project and goes into design. But the right-of-way is reserved, and that was as a part of the rezoning in the River District.
But I hear it's already protected as part of the current agreement.
Yeah, the right-of-way is protected.
Okay. So what are the other negotiations? I guess I'm trying to get a list of, what we agreed upon and what is something new that we are considering or that we are being asked for.
So for the River District tonight, this was just an update. We don't have a current negotiation going on with Crescent Communities. There's no ask from them. This was just, this project's been going on for 6 years. We wanted you all to know kind of where things stood and remind everybody of the commitments that were made as a part of the rezoning. So nothing is changing as it relates to River District proper. There was a recent rezoning just to the south of River District with McCraney that has had a recent negotiation to do some of the infrastructure work and do a reimbursement as a part of that. And that is what will come to you in October.
All right. Ms. Ajmera?
Yeah, no, that answers my question.
All right.
I was just trying to figure out if there was an ask at the end of the presentation, but it's just an update. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Phipps?
Yeah, don't we have to come up with the realization that the budget and funding aspects for the state of North Carolina and North Carolina DOT is precarious right now, that any plans that we had 6 years ago is got to be revisited in view of anticipation of some projects being scrapped or delayed or whatever. So does that not factor into this discussion?
Well, I think as it relates to the Catawba crossing, you said it. I mean, yeah, there are budget constraints, right? Where does this project fall on the priority list and things like that? The position that we took, and again, I'm going back, several years ago, was that the River District can continue and start to develop out as it is. Right now, again, there's nothing there. So some would argue, and some did argue, that there was no need for the Catawba crossing because there's no there right now. But in time, the crossing becomes more critical as Gaston grows, and that back and forth between the two counties becomes more critical. It is important. And so that was our push years ago, was to try to push that realization that, a bridge will take time. But again, there's budget constraints, there's other priorities in other parts of the Carpo area.
I just have to say that this week, or last week, I had the opportunity to hear from the new NCDOT secretary, and along with Raleigh and Greensboro and several other large cities, and projects are coming off the list, not getting on the list. Yeah. And it's going to be very, very difficult. They're still trying, from the commission that Julie was on, to figure out how to tax cars, especially electric cars and everything else, to even get back to the level of standard for our maintenance. And so I would assume that until there's a real development plan in Gaston County, that the River District can exist and be there, but you've got to have some way to pay for that bridge that's not going to be the River District. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But anything that we think we're doing in terms of transportation with the state, I think we have to just cross our hands and hope
that they don't take stuff off.
Yeah,
it's already funded.
Already they've deleted the super road for Matthews from the list, and that road is Independence, is our Independence, and they've been waiting for it 40 years, and it's off the list now. So it's a tough time for them. Okay, thanks everyone for a great discussion and a great update, Elizabeth and Tracy. All right, so now we're going to, I guess the question is, we've got the nominations for the 3 committees as well as the committee reports. And we're going to take committee reports by exception, and I think we have 2 reports that have said that they want to make sure that council hears from the committee, and that's the TAP as well as intergovernmental. And so do you want to do that before we go to the nominations? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start with intergovernmental, Mr. Winston or Mr. Bakari? Yes, I see you.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, not much of an update. I think everybody's been getting their legislative updates on Friday, and you can read what's in here. Again, I just wanted to highlight that we are going, in our last committee meeting, Mr. Fenton highlighted the legislative agenda process that we'll be embarking on here really now. So time is of some essence. And it would be, I think, very helpful in the next 30 days, really, if you've got any ideas, asks, or things you want staff to research as it relates to our state and federal legislative agendas. Of course, just a reminder, staff makes their recommendations as well, and we have the prerogative to put things that we want on it by vote. So they should email myself and Mr. Bakari and Dana Fenton, who is the most important person in this process. So that's the report.
I do want Councilman to know that I sent both of our senators thank you notes for supporting the infrastructure plan. And I believe that that's really the kind of thing that we need to let them know, that when they do this kind of good work, we want to say thank you for doing that good work. And we continue to work with the Department of Transportation to be in line if they ever get the bill passed, so that we can begin to do some of this really good work for our own community. So with that, the next report we'll have is from Mayor Pro Tem, and it's the TAP Committee, which has a number of significant topics underway and working really hard on. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I appreciate all my other committee chairs ceding their time to me so I can read. I can read these 4 pages. I'll go quick. We have been busy as a committee. My committee colleagues are Mr. Eggleston, who's vice chair, Mr. Driggs, Mr. Newton, and Mr. Winston. And we did meet twice this month because we had a really full agenda. We met, the first time was 3 hours the first time. We didn't get through everything. And so we had a couple folks come back with updates. So in the first meeting, on September 22nd, we got an update on the UDO, and I would encourage my colleagues to please go ahead and read that. That's in our packet, because specifically they were talking about residential character overlays and parking minimums and maximums. So that was important information. We then had an update from Michael Smith on the Center City 2040 plan. Well, not an update. This at first was the presentation. And in that presentation, they presented what they're calling a big picture vision for the growth of the urban core and what the priorities in that were in terms of the executing the plan with their consultants, and that being ensuring equity, opportunity, improving our mobility network, and supporting the maturation of Center City neighborhoods. We ended up, I'll just highlight a couple things. We acknowledge that there's things in that plan that really are outside of our purview, that being the Second Ward School and Queen City Park. And so we want to be careful not to give the impression to the public that has become our responsibility, even though because it's in the Center City plan. We love the vision and the aspiration, but we have to be really careful with what we can do and what we can't do. 2 things in particular have been on council members' minds. One, the future of the epicenter. We didn't really get information on that, but that's something that, we all really feel like as long as that epicenter is in the condition it's in, we can't expect Uptown to thrive, and we really are all anxious to hear some kind of a plan for the epicenter. And then the second area was with regards to parking. This has been a concern of a lot of us, and we felt like the Center City plan didn't really address how the aspirations of the Center City lines up with our transformational mobility plan. So if we want to be a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly city, what are we doing about parking in the future for these buildings? And we asked if they could come back with some sort of a plan to either engage a consultant to look at not how to build more parking uptown, but how to manage parking, the number of parking spots uptown that will line up with our transformational mobility plan. So we'll continue to focus on that in other meetings when they present to us. They came back and finished that report in the September 27th meeting. We also got an update on the Silver Line, the locally preferred alternative. And again, I won't read all that, but please go back and have a look at that. An economic analysis of the Silver Line, a lot of discussion about if the line were to go through Uptown, it could generate a certain amount of economic benefit, and then if it was going the 11th Street route, it would, they put a number on that as to what the economic development could be. We kind of felt like it was a moot point a little bit because it's not going to go Uptown. We're not going to build the tunnel. So it was interesting, but we did at least focus on the fact that this is about economic development, not just about transporting people. So And then the last presentation was on the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. That was also, that presentation focused on the fiscal impact analysis of specifically 2.1 in the comp plan. And the comp plan had two particular goals that focus on housing. It's creating more housing and creating more types of housing. And of course, there is conversation about affordable housing. And the biggest takeaway from the analysis was that the upzoning does create, there is some impact on property values where it will go up. However, the value of certain parcels, while some parcels did increase in value, they did not find that neighborhoods overall, average home prices or average rental rates in these neighborhoods went up substantially. I'm not sure there's much we could do these days to make prices go down. So if there's any great idea that's a healthy idea, we're certainly open to that. But and then I just want to remind my council members that we're in the middle of this mapping process right now with the comp plan, and it's really important to let your residents in your districts know that. And right now, some of the neighborhood groups are looking at the actual parcels identified, and they have found that there are errors. And why that's important is that if there is a parcel that's a single family house and it's the zoning assigned to it, the place type assigned to it is commercial, and that's not appropriate now, we got to get those things identified, because once that map is, that first map is set in stone, all the future changes will come from that first map. So encourage your neighborhood leaders to really look at those parcels in and around their neighborhood. They know better than anybody if it's zoned correctly, if it's identified correctly with our new place types, or if it's not. So that would be one. And I'm happy to talk to anybody offline afterwards if you want more information on that. So that's it in a nutshell. The rest of it you can certainly read in for more details. So unless you have questions.
Watlington?
Yep, I've got two. The first one is in regards to what you just mentioned, and I would even go so far as to formally request that we utilize our planning commissioners to do that. Planning Commissioner representing District 3, R.J. Harvey, has started that process.
Could you slow down a little bit and repeat that? I didn't.
From the beginning?
What are you encouraging or asking for?
I'm saying that I would like our planning commissioners to lead that work. R.J. Harvey, our District 3 planning commissioner, is currently doing that with our community leaders. And so I would like to formally ask whatever process that needs to be, that we utilize our planning commission members to do exactly that.
It's a big process. I mean, just, you know, just, I think it's important to ask your neighborhood leaders too, because I'm not sure.
Just so I'm clear, that's what I'm saying. He as the commissioner is reaching out to the neighborhood leaders.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I thought you meant the planning commissioner look at every parcel.
No.
Got it. Okay.
So that was one. And then I've got a question in regard to the Budget and Effectiveness Committee.
Okay, we can come back. Let's come back to that. I want to make sure that when we do that, that the planning commission, I'm not sure exactly how their rules and guidelines are. So let's make the request and find out who's participating. But I really would encourage the elected folks as much as possible to get in there, because, you know, we went through a whole lot of process and a lot of conversation about being engaged, involved, and knowing what's going on the ground. And this is like ground. This is like making sure it works. So we will ask the planning committee chair, who I believe, I can't remember if it's Sam?
Kiva Sanders.
No, Kiva's zoning.
No, it's Kiva Salmon.
Are we asking
Yes,
the zoning committee or the planning committee to do it? You know, they have two
So
committees.
she's now the chair of the planning committee.
I'm not sure who's talking to me.
Sorry,
Oh,
this is
sorry,
Ty.
I didn't see you up there, Ty. So, Ty, which group would be best to do that?
The planning commission is currently working, and as a matter of fact, they had their work session today on the plan. And so they will be going through the planning committee the same way we went through the comprehensive plan, where everything went through the planning committee before we went.
So I know Kimba is zoning committee chair.
So Kiva is
She's the chair of
so the
both.
committee
the
chair,
big,
but
but she's
Phil
also out on the
Guzman
zoning,
is the
but
planning committee.
I don't know, I can't remember. All right, so we'll get that, Ty, moving that forward, Ms. Watlington. Okay. Any other questions
A
for?
follow-up question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Ajmira.
Yes, so Mayor Pro Tem, on the Silver Line, there were a couple of changes that were proposed to the path. I looked at the presentation materials. What has been the community's feedback on those changes, or is that yet to happen?
Which changes specifically?
So there were 8 changes, right? So one change was avoiding Green Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
There were other changes around adding one more station to the First Ward Park or near First Ward. So there were 8 changes. I mean, I can go through all 8. I
Okay.
don't remember all 8 on top of my head, but.
I'll ask Ty to
Has
give
there
us all
been-
a. Oh, I'm sorry, I'd ask Taiwo if he could fill us all in on those. The decision wasn't made on that extra stop in the Garden District. They're still looking at that. I think the Green Hotel was avoided because of
Yes.
redevelopment potential. So maybe Taiwo, if you could just follow up on Ms. Ajmira's 8 points, that would be great so that we all have that information.
Okay,
I will
that
do
would be
that.
great. Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Ajmira. All right. Any other questions for the TAP committee? All right, so Ms. Watlington had a question, Mr. Driggs, about budget and effective government.
Yeah, I've got a question and perhaps a comment. I see here, I know that we have been talking about our next steps after the current redistricting process. And I know that it has come up a number of times, this discussion coming out of the governance committee previously. I see 4-year terms here and staggered terms as well. I don't see a discussion around 8 district reps. And I know that Mayor Pro Tem brought it up, I think, last month, and several of my colleagues I've spoken with, and it seems to be something that folks are interested in looking at. And so I just want to know, Mr. Driggs, is that a part of this discussion?
I would say that, for one, I would defer to the chairman of the ad hoc committee on redistricting as to what the scope of that work is. On the other subjects, I think there was a feeling that, particularly given the tight time frame in which we were trying to get the redistricting done and the amount of time it might take to make a decision about changing the districts and then realigning according to those changes, I think the thought was we will do it in 2 steps. We're going to get the redistricting done in this near-term time frame, and those other topics, as far as I'm concerned, are still alive. I mean, they were offered. We just need to find a suitable occasion to take them up. The lead time, for example, on things like changing the terms involves public engagement and hearings and things like that. So that could not be done in conjunction with the redistricting process. And again, Mr. Graham, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, just so I'm clear, my questions, I'm clear that redistricting committee, the 8 districts is not inside that scope. So just for the record, I'm not asking about if 8 districts is included in the current redistricting committee. My question is in regards to this policy question here, this referral to the Budget and Effectiveness Committee outside of the scope of the existing redistricting committee. It says committee recommendation made to discuss with full council options for consideration of 4-year staggered terms. And so definitely that's something that is outside of this current redistricting scope. What I'm asking is the intention of this policy question to include 8 districts? And if not, I would like to include it here. And if that requires a formal motion, we can decide today if we want to include it or not. But I do want to lift it up.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
I would
Mr.
say
Driggs,
that
Mr. Jones
the
wanted to.
recommendations that we got are still active, and some of them we haven't acted on yet. So, and I believe our attention was directed mainly to trying to get this redistricting done in the near term before we address those issues. Because when we get around to an 8th district, we're going to have to start looking at precincts and how that would work. As far as the terms are concerned, there is no current activity in the Budget and Effectiveness Committee related to the recommendation about terms. It's something we could take up again, but it's not being worked on actively right now.
I wanted to get Mr. Jones.
So, thank you. So I believe, if I'm correct, and I think I am, I believe one of the recommendations from the Citizens Advisory Committee on Governance governance was 8 districts, but 3 at large. So the conversation of 8 districts, I would think, would be relevant because it was a part of that task force recommendations. So I think it's already in.
And that's what I wanted to say. This is, if you, anything under the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations would be in the committee. And this was just one part of it because they did talk a little bit about that, but the whole thing stays on because it's from the Citizens Advisory Committee. So everything should come back from that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the committee members or committee chairs, members? Okay. So with that, now we go to our nominations. So tonight, the City Council will consider nomination to at least 3 boards and commissions. I'd like to take them in reverse order so that we can work back towards arts and culture and see where we stand. The council members, I think, have submitted their nominations and to the clerk. And so now we will have the clerk give us the results of it. Tomorrow she will email and do those things. And then I think we will vote on the next one. And I think that, Madam Clerk, will you also review with us that the section of the resolution on appointments and committees regarding the, you may be voted on tonight if you choose.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, per your rules regarding nominations and appointments, an individual that has applied, if they receive 2 nominations, they move forward in the process of being considered for an appointment. Tonight, if any individual receives 6 or more nominations, they can be appointed tonight upon a motion, second, and a vote to do that. Otherwise, it would carry over to the next business meeting. So that's what your rules allow.
All right, any questions for the clerk? Hearing no questions, let's go to the Charlotte Equitable Development Commission. Madam Clerk, will you read the results for that committee?
Yes, ma'am. For the Charlotte Equitable Development Commission, there were 6 positions that you were asked to select for, and there were no individuals that received 6 or more nominations. So that will automatically carry over to the October 11th meeting.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have a process question about this.
Yes.
Is there anybody that is at 5, for instance? Because I'd like to know if there's an opportunity to go ahead and get some folks appointed.
I think that we can provide that information to all of the council. I just don't know if they would be able to get it right now tonight. I mean, so it would come back. She will send it out tomorrow.
So then, no, we won't be able to appoint anybody tonight?
No, nobody had 6 votes that were up. So I would worry about adding something and not including those folks unless, I don't know how many people got 5.
There were 2 individuals that have 5 nominations.
So
there are others that have, there's 1 other person with 4 and 2 other individuals with 3 nominations. Well, several individuals with 3 nominations.
All right, Mr. Winston.
I hear what Ms. Watlington is asking for, and it is something that we have done in the past. I would move that we not do that for these committees. The gravity and the intentionality behind the formation of these are important. We have been having a lot of constructive conversations amongst colleagues, amongst community members, and amongst staff. And I would just ask us to go about this process by the letter, intentionality-wise, and take this opportunity to have even more interactions and really refine these choices and the guidance behind these committee nominations.
Okay. All right, with that, any objection to proceeding under our existing rules? And I agree with you, but some of these committees, we come back almost every 2 weeks and we have vacancies. In this case, these people are making a genuine commitment to us to walk the path with us on the 2040 plan.
So I would concur with Mr. Winston. So we'll go ahead and send out the other items or the names and the other folks tomorrow. Madam Clerk, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's go to NEST.
For
NEST
the
committee.
Charlotte's Nest Commission, there were a total of 10 positions, and they were categorized. So I will read for you the names of the individuals that received 6 or more votes and the categories in which they were provided. There were 2 appointments for housing advocates category. 1 individual received 7 nominations. Justin Harlow received 7 nominations.
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
Justin Harlow received 7 nominations.
I don't know him, do I? Who is he?
So the other position, there were 2 under that category. The other position will come back to you on October the 11th.
Excuse me, this is why I asked the question, because I've written a candidate in under the impression that we could nominate from the floor, and I just want to know whether or not I need to ask here for a second to that person. That's why I'm a little bit, I was under the impression that we could nominate people from the floor.
Well, I think last time, the clerk, I think we opened up the applications again for, now, let me go back. Let's go walk through the process, Madam Clerk. Last time when we were doing this, if I recall, we talked about opening up the applications again, and did we reopen all the applications for all the boards?
The application deadline was extended. That's what
Thank
happened,
you.
to August the 27th.
Okay, but I didn't make it up as far as nominating.
You're
someone.
right. There was a discussion about nominating that just because that you had the opportunity to nominate someone, but you didn't, you were going to, I don't know that we said, the deadline was set and it wasn't from the floor. I think it was that a council member could nominate someone. And
So I guess that's what I'm confused about. At what point would a councilman be able to nominate someone if this discussion didn't
up
happen
until
until
the
today?
Or write it on the ballot, right?
help me. I'm sorry. Wait, Mr. Eggleston, please. I'm just going to go ahead and say that my understanding, the deadline was extended. Council members were, Ms. Watlington's correct, able to nominate people.
And they have the opportunity to write in additional names on the ballot. There is on the ballot it says
Right.
other, and you can write in someone. But the process that moves them forward is that they must have 2 nominations.
Right.
So if you write in someone, the process would be to ask one of your colleagues to also write in that person so that they move forward in the process.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fitz?
Yeah, so if anybody got 6 or more, can we vote them in for that particular?
You
Yes,
can
sir.
tonight,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, good.
And Dr. Harlow received 7 votes as a housing advocate, and so, but no one
There are
else
others
received.
that received 6
There
or
are
more.
additional, so?
Yes.
All right, we'll go through the rest of them all together. All right, Madam Clerk?
For the position of a for-profit affordable housing developer, Nair Haswala received 6 nominations. For the position of market rate housing developer, Kathleen Malumian received 8 nominations. For the resident who has experienced or is experiencing displacement, G.Q. Lewis received 6 nominations. For the housing finance category representative, Kim Graham received 8 nominations. And for the land use category representative, Angela Ambrose received 9 nominations. And all others will come back to you at the October 11th meeting.
Motion to appoint everyone with 6 or more nominations.
Second.
We have a motion to do the appointment of those that receive 6 or more nominations that the clerk has just read for us. And I saw the motion was by the Mayor Pro Tem and a second by Mr. Winston or Mr. Eggleston.
Is there any discussion? I'm sorry. What are you pointing? So is there any discussion regarding the motion? Anybody virtually have a discussion point? Okay, hearing none. All right, I'm going to go through a roll call to approve the selection of these positions that receive 6 or more. Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Congratulations to those folks joining the Nest Commission, and we'll come back with the remaining slots on October 11th. All right, so now let's go to the arts position, Arts and Culture Group, Advisory Board. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson?
So does that mean the ballots are going to be sent back out to us and we have an opportunity to vote again? That's what's going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
To fill the remaining slots, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, on the 11th.
But only with people that got 2 votes, right? You can't make another write-in.
Right.
No, that's not what I heard, so let me make sure that what I heard, well, I thought the clerk said, if someone writes something in and a second person writes in, but when would you know to do that so that it would be, you couldn't do it and get it before the, you have to turn it in early, so what, is there a deadline, or, help me.
Yes, yes,
I'm
ma'am.
asking too, I don't know the
When we
answer.
send the ballots out, we ask that you submit the ballot to us by a certain time, and really that means at the beginning of this meeting. So up until this meeting starts, you have the opportunity to collaborate, discuss, with each other about the nominations that you wish to move forward.
Ms. Watlington?
Is it possible to see everybody's beforehand? I know that there's these one-on-one kind of conversations, but it would be helpful to me if I could see, all right, this is where we stand, and then if it makes sense to shift some folks over. I guess that's the piece for me that's missing a little bit. It's like I might have a conversation with 2 or 3 people, and we may be doing the same thing, but these 2 or 3 people may be doing the same thing too, and nobody's got a picture of the holistic piece. And so when does that happen?
Usually it's in the hallways on the day of the meeting, but obviously that's not possible with us having virtual meetings. So I think this is one of those things that the council has to figure it out. But the real question, I want to make sure, because I want to be really clear on this, what Ms. Watlington is saying is I've got someone I'd like to nominate for this slot, and when does she have to have that with a second nomination for that person to appear on the ballot?
The nominations process requires 2 nominees to move forward. At the next meeting, you will have all the nominations that have, all the names of the individuals that have received 2 or more votes. There isn't an opportunity to write anyone in on the second ballot because that, you've eliminated everybody else that didn't meet the criteria that you have established.
So I'll find out tomorrow whether my person got.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And you will also see the names of your colleagues, who nominated who. You will see that. That will be provided in the email.
And then there is an opportunity to write in for the October 11th.
There is
No,
not.
There is not.
Your choices
Your
are
choice is not
the
there,
names.
so it's like if the name's not there now, you don't have a chance to write it in. That's what I'm hearing now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me when I heard it the first time, so. All right, Ms. Johnson?
So if there was a lack of clarification if nominations were going to be taken from the floor, and if Councilmember Watlington planned on doing that, and the rules are, I don't know if they're changing tonight or if they were unclear, I think the fair thing to do, and maybe if there's something in writing that says 2 or more will move forward, or if there's something that clarifies that for us, If there's not, then I would say that we open up the ballot again for, and it be an open process.
I am given the script from the rules that are written, and that's why I read that names of nominees will not be read at the dais. Tomorrow, the clerk will name the applicants that have received at least 2 nominations, and that comes from our rules, our adopted, our adopted procedure that's approved by council. So I think that was Mr. Winston's point, and I don't know, I think Ms. Watlington will find out if that person's in there tomorrow, and we'll just go from there. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if the clerk would just be allowed to talk about it. If the clerk would just be able to say what the process is, and I think that would give clarity to everybody in the room and on the screen.
Let's do it one more time.
So your appointments process is a 2-part process. The first part is nominations. We advertise and receive applications of those persons that are interested in serving, and we provide that information to you. So the first part of the process is the nominations process. And you have the opportunity to choose from the applicants the number of positions that are available, whether it's 6 appointments or, 1 or how many ever appointments there are. You have the opportunity to vote or nominate those number of positions. So in order to move forward, an individual has to have at least 2 nominations on the ballot. All the applicants are listed. There's also an empty slot for you to write in someone whose application we may not have, or whose application we did not receive. So if there are 2 nominations, that person moves forward. Anyone at this point in the nominations process that receives 6 or more nominations, per your rules, can be appointed tonight. Anyone that receives less than 6, 2 or more nominations moves forward and will come to you at the next business meeting. At the next business meeting, it is the appointments process. And your selections are the individuals that receive 2 or more nominations at this meeting. They move forward. And those are the people that you have to select from. Tomorrow, you receive an email from my office that identifies those people that were nominated and the council members that nominated them. And so when you receive your ballot for October the 11th, those names will appear on the ballot, and those are the ones that you have to choose from.
That's a follow-up question. There were, I think, 3 names from one of these committees that I did not see on the ballot this time around. Is that because they somehow were disqualified?
The names that did not appear on the ballot, one of them, I think you may have emailed me, us about them. One of them, we did not have that application. The other one, there was a mix-up in the name and the way that person, when we filtered the applications to come to you, that name did not move forward because of the way the applications were filtered.
Okay.
And that was the issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Now I have a follow-up question. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I wasn't finished. So I understand the process, but just 5 minutes ago, when Councilmember Watlington mentioned it, nominations from the floor, and she said I didn't make that up, and she asked you about it, there seemed to be some confusion that we were going to take nominations from the floor. So I'm simply saying, since there was that confusion, if there is a council member that wanted to make that nomination, I think that would be a
Well,
fair
I might
process.
be confusing. Many times in my hours sitting here, I would follow what the clerk says, because that's why she is got the responsibility and accountability for it. So I may have been confused as well. I was listening to Ms. Watlington and kind of made sense, but what we have is our actual rules that we followed, which is what Mr. Winston was saying as a point.
Okay, and can we just get clarification from the attorney on that? Oh, I'm sorry, I texted you so you'd be prepared. Never mind, that's
Well, you
okay.
texted me? No, so how it would work is that you've got established rules, and you would go by those rules in terms of clarity. I'm not sure who understood what, but you've got the rules that the clerk has read out. If you wanted to do something different than the rules, now you're talking about suspending the rules, which would require a 2/3 majority vote to suspend the rules. But you don't have anything for, if there was a misunderstanding about the rules, can we go with a hybrid? You either got to go with the rules or suspend the rules and do something else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as they say, a friend of mine says, are all minds clear and hearts open? Let's go ahead and, Mr. Phipps? Oh, it says Phipps.
Mr. Eggleston, Mr. Eggleston.
Okay, all right, we still have 2 closed sessions to do tonight, and we still have another committee to fill, so I just want to make sure. Okay, all right, Mr. Eggleston?
I mean, if we're moving on, then it's moot, but I mean, this is the same process as every other month. We just happen to be appointing to new boards that are just now created, but nothing's changed from the way we do this. Every month we do this, so if we're moving on, I'm fine.
Well, I believe that that's what we're doing. We're following the clerk's guidance unless there is something else that we do. So, Ms. Watlington?
Just for the record, then, I move to suspend the rules.
All right, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll have a roll call vote now. Suspension of the rules, yes or no, Mr. Newton?
No.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No.
Ms. Ajmira?
No.
Mr. Phipps?
No.
Mr. Winston?
No.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
No.
Mr. Eggleston?
No.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
All right, so I've got 4 yeses and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that right? No, that's not right. I don't have it checked right. Well, I know that we have a motion not to suspend the rules. 4 to 7. Okay. Now we're ready to move on? Okay, so now we're going to...
You need 2/3.
Madam Mayor,
All right, we're going to move on to the Arts and Culture Committee. All right, so the Arts Committee, do we have anyone elected?
Yes,
Madam Mayor, I have a question. So why are we suspending rules? I'm confused here.
We didn't.
What?
We're suspending the rules.
So
Okay,
that
we're re-
motion did, okay.
Motion failed.
The motion to suspend the rules did not carry the 2/3 required. All right, so the
So that was
Arts Committee, please, the Arts, do we have anyone? I'm sorry,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why was the motion made to suspend the rules? I'm trying to understand that.
well, I think you can talk to Ms. Watlington after the meeting, and she can explain why she made the motion. And Ms. Johnson seconded, either one of them can explain that. So the Arts Committee now, let's go forward.
yes, ma'am. There were 6 positions available. There were 2 individuals that received 6 or more votes. Shafali Patel received 6 nominations, and Nick Tosco received 7 nominations.
Okay. All right.
Point the 2 that received over 6 nominations tonight.
Second,
We have a
Driggs.
motion and a second by Mr. Driggs and Mr. Eggleston. Any discussion on that motion? All right, so now let's have.
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
Can I just explain the process that we talked about for this committee?
Sure.
Okay, so, and this may have been confusing because I called everybody over the weekend tried to reach out to everybody to explain the process because we had 131 applicants for this board, which is phenomenal. And we're really appreciative to everybody who has stepped up to participate on the advisory board. And we want everybody to know that that Priya has indicated that it makes sense to have a steering committee as well. So this will not be the only opportunity people will have to participate in the Arts and Culture Committee process. That said, with all of those applicants, we really were hoping to get to round 2 next week and fill out the board. And I was hoping we could move everybody who had 1 vote forward, but as we said, the process is 2 nominations moves you forward, and therefore that's what the process is unless we had voted to suspend that. So if I confused anybody with my message over the weekend about the 1, Stephanie clarified that for me today. So it would be everybody with 2 nominations moves forward. The ad hoc committee is going to take a look at the remaining list on Wednesday and make a recommendation just based on rounding out those 6 seats from a criteria standpoint. That Priya had indicated to all of us here that certain categories of nominees would be helpful on that board. And as you know, we didn't have categories when we made nominations. So the ad hoc committee will make recommendations for the other 4 seats. Those are only recommendations. They're not binding. Nobody has to follow it. It's just a way to help hopefully move the process forward so we can get all 6 of our seats appointed by the 11th. Braxton.
So I think this is a good conversation about rules because this is new information. I wonder if, since we are referring this back to an ad hoc committee, if we would have the ability to know everybody who got a vote, because that's what that was discussed. We would have went about it differently this weekend. I know I would have. If I knew that there was not an agreement amongst colleagues. So if that is outside the rules, I will make a motion to suspend the rules and move everybody with, at least let the ad hoc committee know everybody who got a vote for this committee.
I don't think that you have to have a suspension of the rules to inform the ad hoc committee of who got the votes, Mr. Winston. So, I mean, all of this is public information, and you can see who got the votes for every one of these committees. And so that is really available to anyone, so it doesn't need a suspension of the rules.
But the ad hoc committee wouldn't be making a recommendation to include people that
I'm
only
going to
have 1
rescind
vote.
my motion because you're right. Even if we discussed it, it would be a waste of time to discuss on Wednesday because they could not be considered for a nomination on Monday. So I rescind my motion.
Thank you. So I'm sure the clerk will send out all of the nominees. And the thing about it, all of these groups, we are appointing a group of people that we want to see to focus on the charge, but there's going to be many processes in this effort. We're talking about big things now. Arts and culture, we're talking about, displacement and gentrification and infrastructure. So I would hope any committee that's created would really understand how to engage with the community and the citizens and have advisory groups as well. So before I go to that, we have a motion on the floor. Is your comment around? I thought I had, Mr. Yeah, we do. We have a motion on the floor. Okay. All right, now everybody's confusing me. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the 2, Ms. Patel and Mr. Tosco. So is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing no discussion, I'm going to go through the roll call vote to accept those 2 nominations.
My question is,
Ms. Johnson?
So can we clarify or discuss on record the rule for employees versus board members having the ability to serve on this commission?
Are either of these people board members?
Yeah, I believe so.
Which one do you believe is a board member? So we can look at their application.
Board members, not employees.
Right, didn't you say board members?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, well, I'll show you the email that I'm going off of. I don't want to say it publicly. So what's the policy? Tell us about I guess.
Let's be very specific. We're on a motion to vote for two people that got 6 nominations.
Okay.
And so the question is, if you're questioning, you're asking what was their participation, the clerk can pull up their application, and I think the question asks what board members, are, or if you're on a board.
Thank you.
So why don't we just go ahead and clarify that?
Okay.
Because I think that makes it pertinent.
Okay.
If,
So-
my understanding,
Nick is not, so it would be Ms. Patel. But the question would be, does she want to receive funding for whatever board she's on?
Right, because there was a rule that anyone that's an employee of any of the arts organizations cannot receive funding if they wish to be on the commission. And then I guess the committee decided, and I don't know if this was announced publicly, that's what I wanted on record. The committee decided that anyone who's a board member of these organizations did not have the same restriction, only if they were employees, correct?
Well, it wasn't a committee decision, it was an ethics, it's what follows our ethics policy. And a volunteer board member, we do that with all of our committees. They can serve, but we can't have somebody who receives remuneration from their organization applying for funding. That would violate our ethics policy.
So I understand one ethics policy, but it seems like it would also violate an ethics policy because board members have such influence on an organization's decisions and operations. So it may not be the same ethics policy as far as the financing. However, there is that consideration that they are on a board or an entity that funds their organization. So that's another ethics policy. I don't know what policy.
I think Ms. Johnson still has the floor, Mr. Winston, so.
Yeah, so I just wanted on record or clarification so that the public understands, because we did receive an email asking that question as well, that we are recommending that individuals who are employees of these organizations, the ethics policy states that individuals who are employees of the organization are not eligible to be on the commission. However, board members of these same organizations are.
I know.
I think that's where the ad hoc
No,
group ended up.
so-
Yes.
I know that this is, but I think the question that you're asking, Ms. Johnson, is a separate issue because I believe that it's been confirmed by at least Mr. Winston's review of their applications that they are not board members.
Okay, so hold on.
So,
Mr. Driggs,
I know, but
can you ask Mr. Driggs, because he sent a letter, email about one of them, and I thought it mentioned that they were a board member of some.
Mr. Driggs, which name is it, Ms.
Patel?
Mr. Driggs, is Mr. Patel a board member of one of the arts Ms.
Patel.
I said Ms. Patel, I'm sorry. Ms. Patel is a member of, are you aware she's a member of a board organization?
I took information about her off her website. I think her application should be the binding document as to her current status. I don't have any information other than what I lifted from a website to try to inform people.
And that
So
may
she's-
not be
she's not-
current. What does her application say, Ms.?
It says list any boards you have served on in the past. NA, list any boards you are currently serving on. YMCA, Morrison Branch Guild of Charlotte Artists. Please describe any background or abilities that qualify you to serve on these boards and committees. She lists several different groups that she has engaged with in the past, which including the ASC. I think, are we referring to the ASC as the board? Yeah, but I'm just saying that she's participating. So I'm just trying to put context, full
Yes.
context of the conversation.
So what I hear is that right now, it may be information of past experience that's not listed on her application. So right now, we have a motion for those two.
I found former board member and historian at South End Arts.
Yeah. Okay. So that, I want to just go ahead and say we have a motion to adopt the two that received the 6, and I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call for yes or no for that motion. And I guess we can do them separately or we can do them together? The motion was together. All right. So Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari? Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson?
No.
All right. That passes. And so, let's go ahead. We still have to get through this list.
We still have to fill out 4 more.
I know, so there are 4 additional positions to be filled. There are 8 nominees that received, I believe, how many nominees received more than 2 votes? That might help us. More than 2. 2 or more, sorry, 2 or more. Thank you, Mr.
While Ms. Kelly is adding that, can I just make a comment? Because I think it's really important that there's a difference between not wanting to nominate someone who sits on a board. Everybody can do that if that's what they feel is the right thing. That in itself, though, is not against our ethics policy if they are a volunteer board member, and we do that on our other boards and commissions. So I want to separate. It's okay to vote against somebody because of that. That's everybody's prerogative, but it doesn't mean that we can't make a recommendation for somebody like that or that anybody else can vote for a board member. If you vote for someone that is an employee of a board, you could do that too, but that would preclude them from receiving funding for their organization because that does violate our ethics policy. And so that's the difference between what we want and what we can do.
That's, all right. Ms. Watlington?
So just on that piece, then, nobody then has been excluded on the basis of them being an employee.
I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
I'm saying, so at this point, nobody has been excluded on the basis of them being an employee at this point,
No,
correct?
because you're not excluded. You
Yeah.
just have to say, I'm not going to apply
Yeah.
for a grant.
Okay, just
So,
wanted to make sure
you
that
know,
was.
I think there are a lot of people that could be doing that. So, all right, so we now have, how many people do we have?
13 people that received 2 or more nominations
So
for
13
consideration.
for the 4 slots that we would be presenting on October the 11th. I think the ad hoc committee is still going to meet about it to look at where these positions sit and make a recommendation or provide comment, maybe not a recommendation, but comment to the full council members. Is that right? Okay, Ms. Johnson?
Can I get a copy of the ethics policy?
It's in the clerk's office. Ms. Kelly, can you send it to council?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that ends our nomination process for the 3 groups, and congratulations to those that have moved forward, and I look forward to the remaining group being established and the work that we're going to do. Now, I need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCG General Statute 143-318 11A3 for the City Council to consult with attorneys employed or retained by the city in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to consider and give instructions to the attorneys concerning the handling or settlement of a claim. And so
Second.
I think we have to now do the whole switch to the other website for those. All right, Mr. Baker.
I'm not sure if it was on your copy or not, but the claim is Mosher versus City of Charlotte.
The claim, no, it is not on my website. So everybody heard the city attorney? Okay.